Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight, which I always forget we never have figured out. What do you say? Do you say it's something like it's the longest running, most popular esports podcast? What is the exact categorization?
It's definitely the longest running and most viewed. That is definitely true. I mean, it's not any even close. Like the second place is not even close in terms of both when this started, the fact that it's still going, the number of like total views we've had on this show. It's also the biggest podcast in League of Legends esports on an annual basis. Because we just do more episodes, guys. We do like 48 or 50 of these a year. We barely take a week off.
I get so disappointed when I see those times. Like, first of all, there are those episodes in the past of like The Dive that have actually been, unironically, like 1984, Room 101, Memory Hold. Like that one with that Naz woman that just never ever was released about what was going on with the fucking player walker. And to hear that they act like it's just getting shelved temporarily, Monty, but then it just gets actually like deleted from history. Like, what podcast with Naz? There never was one. She is on a sabbatical, whatever. So anyway, like, but I also saw this last week. I think it was last week. They also did they just cancelled like Euphoria because someone, I think like Dracos was ill also. I can't remember what it was, but there was some reason why they just cancelled it. And the same thing I thought was like, bro, who's cancelling podcasts? Like, it's one thing if you actually are so ill, like you're a core person, you can't attend. But like most of those podcasts have like 3 people on them. Like, bro, just get a guest or just because one thing I think's mad is I would actually say for real, the dividing line on who will be successful in content and who will not be actually is along exactly that vein, Monty. The dividing line goes like this. There's the person who goes out of their way to get the episode done, and there's the person who just does the episode if it's super convenient. And the former group will always destroy the latter. Like, if people don't know why I work with people like Maui Snake, Maniac, it's because the joke is, if I myself forgot to message Maui and go, what's your schedule for next week so I can arrange it, he would reach out to me 2 days later and go, oh yeah, by the way, I didn't tell you my thing. Like, these people are self-motivated. Like, they're not waiting around like, well, I guess if it's all perfect, I'll do it. It's like, content will never be perfect. And and you don't have to make it a grind. This is the problem I have, is if it feels like work and you're like, oh, I'm glad to have the week off, you probably shouldn't be doing it. It doesn't sound like you enjoy it. Like, I think the other thing that's mad underrated is, in the modern day, we're not all 17, Monty. Like, we're not all on like some TeamSpeak server where we all come on after school and we can all talk and so. Actually, these podcasts are mainly where we have conversations about the game. True. It's not just for entertainment purposes anymore, is it? Like, the joke of when I used to do the show with Dom was, now I get to see what Dom thinks of my opinions this week or whatever, but like, I'm not DMing them all or whatever. It's kind of not what you do when you're an adult, is it?
Well, it's also, we chat before, after the show too, about other stuff. So it's a nice time to catch up with your friends, turns out.
Yeah, what people don't actually know is it's the 20 minutes before you do a big show with like Richard Lewis, where you get like the download actual, like what's going on in the eSport. That's low key. That's better than the show. But sadly for you people, that part can never be broadcast, I'm afraid. But that's some of the straight fire. It reminds me of the green rooms, you know, because I remember back in the day in CS, you'd have all these people from other games that we all know, like Smix or Rachel Quirico. They'd come into like a CS green room and they'd be sat there like, fucking hell, after like half an hour, because their green room was like, I wonder if Protoss should like build more stock. Or people just going, shall we play Mafia tonight? Would you like to play Mafia? That's a Dota 2. I did StarCraft in Dota 2 there. And in our green room, it would just be like, oh, they got that new coach. Yeah, of course. He was caught fucking messaging people like, oh, really? Is that coming out? Well, I don't know yet. Like, fucking hell. Anyway, we better get out there. Map one's over. Like, fucking hell. Okay. But keep that under your hat, love. Keep that under. Keep it down.
I will say, one of the funniest things about you know, when I lived in Los Angeles, because there were always all of these esports events there, right? So I would have like really big parties at my house and like 40, 50 people would come. So like, for example, when there would be a big event that weekend in LA and there were a bunch of casters and other people that I met or that I knew, I would invite them to my house and I'd grill or smoke a bunch of meat. And what was so funny is like, I did this enough times that I got all the different crowds, right? Like I got the Counter-Strike players and like Counter-Strike people for Flashpoint and other events, Counter-CS events that were in there. You know, I had the League of Legends people. I had, there's a Hearthstone tournament that I produced one time. And so there were a bunch of Hearthstone players at my house. And what's so funny is like, each of these group of people would have just wildly different behaviors at this party.
Oh,
like,
of course.
League of Legends would be more like low key and like talking around the table, but actually interacting and just like kind of just like average and normal. the Counter-Strike players would be like picking up balls in my backyard and just like throwing them at each other and like roughhousing and wrestling and like shouting. And they were definitely like the loudest. And the funniest one was when all the Hearthstone players came around, because all they did is they didn't really drink. They didn't really drink.
Talked about Hearthstone, I'm guessing. Come on, hit me with it.
They went to my board games and just raided all my board games and just played board games at my party.
I mean, I will just say this. The one thing I have never understood on a sort of a real sense, Monty, is it's like this famous phenomenon where someone once made this point, and I thought that is a really shrewd sort of like reading of human nature. They said one of the strange things about women in general as a group is obviously they are the more intuitive sex who sort of go off like their feel for someone, the vibe, etc. But bizarrely, their one blind spot in that area seems to be when they get in a romantic relationship with someone, which is exactly when you'd want to have that skill to know if the person was like full of shit or scamming you or leading you on or, you know, like cheating on a million things. And unfortunately, obviously the irony there is that's exactly when you'd want to be able to have the feel for them and read them, etc. So like similarly, I do feel like one of the things I think is one of the great ironies of the esports industry is that they all love to play that game Mafia, which if people don't know is sort of like more complicated, not on a computer Among Us, basically. If you understand that principle, you understand why people play this game. Except actually, because the joke is because you don't have to do stupid tasks, which is the thing in Among Us, which ruins the game if people play too much. It always works as a game. It's basically just about subterfuge. It's like Game of Thrones. Like, what do you present to the person? Do they believe you? Right? The irony of the Dota 2 scene loving that game is they might be the worst scene ever for actually policing themselves and rooting out people who are scumbags hidden within their ranks. So again, of all the times that skill set could have been applied, guys, oh, damn it. Instead, you're just using it for some nonsense reason. And also, as mentioned on that past episode of The Four Horsemen, it's not I have a problem with the game Mafia. It's just they're playing Mafia, unironically, Monty, in the moments where absolutely me and certain other people might have been like, fuck it, going on tonight, you know, like two double vodka. Like that's what we're doing while they're going, I think he's Mafia. Like, so again, no problem. It's just different horses for courses, as you say, Monty. We're different crowds.
It was just like really funny because every time I'd have a party with like a different group of like esports people, it was just such an insanely different experience, right? So good.
It's why, by the way, as a quick anecdote, one of the most jarring experiences I ever had in esports twice was when I came into contact with North American communities in two different games, Monty. First of all, the most famous one was StarCraft. Bro, remember I come from Quake and then Counter-Strike, right? And famously at UK Counter-Strike, for example, everyone in all the scrims there just types all the time. They just type, you know, like if you die, so you fucking wanker, oh, fuck you. It's all that just all the time. So like that all like COD lobby vibe, that was always like what UK Counter-Strike was like. So I was used to, cause you can't police people being rude to you online, everyone understanding, online sort of like PvP in one of those like MMORPGs. It's like, if you go into that zone, someone can kill you. That's just the way it is. And so I came into StarCraft and I actually thought people were trolling, Monty, because I didn't know the demographic of people in America who played StarCraft was obviously like things like exactly the sort of like second generation Asian kid who should be doing school. Funny enough, just like in Korea, but he plays that game instead as his vibe. And he's like in the chess club with all the nerds. It's like a really actually sort of like good boy vibe. And so they would all be having scandals, Monty, where it was like, he didn't type GG. And I was like, I actually thought it was like satire. Like, is this a joke or something? There's no way. And they were like, he is so BM. He did not even type GG. And I was thinking like, what, has he typed like fuck you or something? Like, no, he just didn't put GG. And I was like, this can't be real. So there's that one in StarCraft. That already showed me there was a type of nerd. Because basically in America, I do think, like Monty say, it went by who you are as a person. Like the kind of person, by the way, who played Counter-Strike from that area of America would be the opposite, Monty. He might actually be like a bad boy, like some guy who's from a similar background and family, but he, instead of joining a gang, the joke is he goes to a LAN cafe and plays CS with sort of like the naughty boys, and he's not doing his homework. So actually the vibe's different. And then the other one, I've always told this one, because funnily enough, it is actually ironically, Monty, the Dom lineup of Dignitas at that IEM Hanover event that made me realize this. I had not been meant to any events that had League of Legends in, right? Usually League before that year, 2012, was the side game, you know, at the IEMs and stuff. Sure, yeah. But that year was the first year it became massive and became the big game, because that was the year when League got the big push from Riot and IEM, and obviously like Hot Shot GG was massive, and Double Lift was there, all the TSM, all the people, you know. And I remember going to that IEM where Dom was there, where he looked all emo and all. You remember what the Dignitas lineup famously looked like, Monty? They looked like the worst literal neck beards of all time. Like, Like, if you wanted to show, and Scara wasn't exactly his best back then, bro, even Void Boy looked like emo. Like, I guess he could sort of pull it off because he had the good looks and that, like, 80s style, but even he looked kind of like a scene kid, you know? And I saw this team, right? And all I thought, Monty, was like, is that what fucking league players are like? And then I've told this story before. Then in walked like some of their girlfriends, right? Monty, most pro players in esports didn't even have girlfriends back then. And you might know this, but back then, because there was like, that's one of the crazy things about League. It's actually one of the first games I think did get a lot of women to play that was an esport, maybe because of support role, maybe because of the cutesy champ, whatever, the anime, Weibo. I remember a lot of games like that were pretty hardcore, like Quake and Counter-Strike, not really got the aesthetic, have they? So I remember sitting like, holy shit, bro, there's that many women in League. And there was so many women in League compared to CS, mate. It was mental. Like, absolutely, CS was that meme of like one girl for like every 50 guys at the LAN. Like, everyone had like a girlfriend in American League of Legends. I remember being like, this is another class as well. This is almost like more of a social game. And that's why, you know, all those stories that came out over the years, which people went too far with, of like people like High and Smithy partying or whatever. No, it's just more like it was actually a way more social game, League of Legends, compared to a lot of the other games. You know what I mean?
And I just, my experience in LA too is like, you know, it was niche, but it was still much more mainstream than a lot more esports, and like, you know, much more like women participation in playing the game. Especially, I mean, you have to remember that like Quake, Counter-Strike, StarCraft, hardcore RTS had virtually no women playing.
Of course. And also, it actually, like I inferred there, believe it or not, even though in the LCS they all trash talked each other, actually the scene was pretty connected behind the scenes. Like, if you went to one of these parties, there'd be players from all the teams there. Actually, even people you thought were rivals would all be there. It was actually more like, it reminded me of like those American high school movies where everyone's just meeting up at someone's on the weekend at someone's mum's out and they're having their fucking party on the deck or some bullshit like that, you know. Except that, again, they're all nerds, so they're all to be playing like Super Smash Brothers Melee or whatever, like drinking some schnapps or something. I don't know, some garbage like that. And all I'll say is this, one thing that also opened my eyes a little bit, because this is early esports, we're talking like 2013, 2014 here. I also did at those specifically League of Legends parties, notice a lot of, let's just say, a lot of people's girlfriends who I thought was person A, going home with person B, but then later on it turned out they were still with person A. Interesting scene. Almost more of a sort of 70s swinger vibe. I was like, what the fuck's going on? There's a lot of that going on,
There's a lot of that in the LCS. Let's just say that some players' careers may have taken a downturn because they were angry about what happened with their girlfriend later on. That is definitely a thing that has happened in the LCS multiple times. It's another one of those examples where you know what's going on, but you can't just tell the reason. You're like, I wonder why this player's performance has degraded so suddenly. And you're like, I know exactly why this is the case.
Right, Monty. Do you know one of the things I do think is actually a mistake in the new show that you love, as previously referenced? And so I'm actually going to do it like Marvel Comics, like as referenced on a past Summoning Insight intro and on Nerd Legion episode whatever with House of the Dragon. Monty thinks House of the Dragon is better than Game of Thrones. Well, one thing I do think in House of the Dragon that they have actually done a bad job with, because even I get caught with this, is, you know, there's that one guy, I'd have to look up what his exact name of the actor is, but there's that actor that already was in Game of Thrones and he plays two characters that are like twins in this show, but it's one actor playing all of them. And I don't think they always do that. I think a lot of fans, when I even just said this now, Monty, are like, what do you mean? And I think they've just realized that's not the same character, even though it couldn't be if you actually follow the plot. But it's not very, put it this way, they don't do a great job of making it distinct. Like, so essentially, I'm going to take on the kind of acting performance that guy did, where you play two distinct characters. So if you could bring up the banner, Monty, I'd like to tell everyone it's called a Factor 2-man play, but by one actor, me, Duncan Thorin Shields, aka Esports. So whenever I'm facing this way, I'll be character one. That will be a distinct character from when I face this way, which is when I'll be a different character, Mr. Factor. So this is the start of the play. Everyone quiet, please, on set. I'm a loyal LFN fan looking to support my favorite content network with my patronage and get great savings. Too bad I'm hungry, too hungry, some would say, to think or cook right now. That's where Factor Meals has you covered this summer, young man. Thing is, though, meals, I get bored of the same meals over and over again. Well, with 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore with Factor. Yeah, but the thing is, I'm sort of trying to be more careful with my diet. Crush your wellness goals this May, or June or July, depending on which copy Thorin read, with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. They have menus like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Yeah, but I don't really want a bunch of frozen meals sitting around. Frozen? Who said anything about frozen? Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy the nutritious, great tasting meals. Yeah, but you know what? I don't really want my meals to be all over the place, though. Like, they catch me one thing one day, one thing another day, one thing. How can I keep track of that? Well, enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. However, do I purchase such a service? I'd gladly pay full price. You don't need to, because as part of our shout out to Joe Biden, call to action, head over to factormeals.com/LFN50 and use the code LFN50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LFN50 at factormeals.com/LFN50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Thank you. Right, that's it. That's the end of that. That's the end of
Bravo.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
10 out of 10. Would watch the Factor play again. Well, thank you very much for that. So, guys,
see the way I captured the motivation of the two characters there. They were they were different. They were different people, but come from different worldviews with different information. Each of them knew, But I was able to, notice how when I was the LFN fan, I was able to be naive. I didn't even understand there was a saving involved. But then when I was the Factor guy, I was just giving out great information and educational matters about the way this product is framed. So, yeah.
We should talk about here's the first topic of conversation today. Like, we are going to get into the leagues, guys, obviously. I promised you guys I wouldn't talk about Saudi again, but they keep doing it.
Not again. Not again. To be fair, there is news coming out every single week at this point. It's actually mental, isn't it?
I can't. Okay, so we're not going to talk. You know why Saudi bad, but what's going on is Saudi related, but we're not going to actually get into the Saudiness of it because the Saudiness of it is obvious, guys. So what is happening is that Saudi Arabia has petitioned the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, famously non-corrupt body, to host a variety of Olympics affiliated esports events. Where, you ask? Well, in Saudi Arabia, of course. So I guess, see, we can't stop talking about it, guys, because they're winning and they just keep getting more. It's like Esports World Cup. But what if we had, Thorin, the World Cup and the Olympics within Saudi Arabia? So they're clearly just trying to corner every single market. The Olympic, so the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has approved this for 12 years or something ridiculous. They are apparently not interested in shooters. Okay, so we're not going to see FPS games there, but apparently they are interested in, the rumor is they're interested in League of Legends, TFT, Rocket League, these kind of games, fighting games, Street Fighter 6.
No, why is this such a clown realm? So people who actually in real life execute other people and shoot people at the border don't want the video games to contain fictional shooting because that would be, like politically inappropriate or, offensive, but they kill people in real life. So why are we such a fucking clown show? Why are we so fucking whack? It's so whack. Also, you could obviously just do a fucking Bane thing there, couldn't you? Like, perhaps he's wondering why you'd shoot a man, but you could just pay him an enormous bag of money to ignore your sins. Bane could do some Bane sports washing there. Monty, the problem with this topic is it's actually the most logical way that always you were going to eventually get the Olympics involved. Because as you say, you actually sort of intentionally made it a joke, but you tripped over the obvious mechanism, which is spoiler. You know how every year for free clout and press, the Olympic Committee would go, we're considering esports, but we decided against it. You're not quite on our level. You're not where we need to be. All they needed the whole time Monty, it was like, you hear those stories when you come from an Anglo country. You go that if you go to certain places, I've heard in Southeast Asia, it's like this. If a policeman comes to you, but he just gives you like a really spurious minor crime, like, oh, what's going on with that? They say, I wouldn't suggest, I'm not a lawyer, but I wouldn't suggest anyone does this. But I've heard in movies that say people who aren't me might go, here's a bribe, sir. Can I now please go on my way? And then they go, yes, thank you for doing business. And that's just how it works there. Well, all I'm going to say is, as you pointed out, with the real World Cup in football, some people have alleged, believe it or not, that there might have been bribes involved that might have gotten them that particular, that. So all I'll say is, it was so obvious the Saudis would get this, because I imagine behind the scenes, they just kept going, another zero, sir, another zero, sir. So, we have reached the appropriate number of zeros. Thank you. We will have the Olympics now. Like, it just seems obvious, right?
The thing was money that was going to get this. Here's a story. Here's a story for you, Thorin. I was in Egypt one time, okay, and I had a bottle of wine, which is fine for me to have, by the way. It's not illegal in Egypt to possess alcohol. Like, they're 20% actually, like Coptic Christian, right? So there's a bunch of people who could drink in Egypt. And I was checking a bag at the airport. And they scanned my bag and opened it up. And the security guy pulls this wine out and he's like, you can't take wine on the plane. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not taking it on the plane. You're going to check my bag, right? He's like, no, you can't take wine. And I just handed him like a $5 bill. And he just said, oh, you're American. You can have wine. I was like, yes.
There you go. I mean, by the way, that just reminds me also, like, that also just reminds me of that Bardolph story, even though it wasn't an official person. That one where he went to all those places, like the fucking pyramids and all that, and he just bribed the guy like $1 or something, and the guy just let him take pictures with all like priceless artifacts. Yeah. Because there was some insane pictures of Bardolph had like his arm around a fucking star. And I was like, why did they even get that close to it? You just bribed the guy. And I was like, what even is this? Get a better security guy in there. Your whole job is to keep him off that shit. What are you doing? No, but come on. It's obvious, Monty, that, listen, here's the thing. It doesn't have to be direct. There could be a thing like, a different company might sponsor someone who works on them. But, there's a million ways you can get to them. But, like, the other thing is, I hope people get as well with this, Monty. This is actually inferred to me. This is probably just a permanent thing going forward. Like, they'll just keep re-upping if it makes sense.
So,
of course.
So I want to first off cite, just, you guys will find this super funny. This is a great analogy about, so you might be wondering, well, what is some of the relationship that the Olympics have had with esports? Because a lot of you remember the Asian Games from last year, which is an Olympic sanctioned event. Winning the gold medal in that event did get a lot of the Korean players exempted from military service, right? For Asia, they have already started running this stuff, but they haven't run the same style of events. But one thing that was really funny, and I found this because James Fudge at the Esports Advocate reported on this a few months ago, but basically the IOC announced that they have ties to the Global Esports Federation. And you may ask, what is the Global Esports Federation? Well, the Global Esports Federation is God only knows what it is, but they have now also allied themselves to the Saudi government and ESL. So they had
the one that was mainly like Asian people or something.
It's Singapore. It's in Singapore.
Yeah, there you go.
So basically, what they did was they announced an Olympic Esports series, and with 2 games, and I'm sure you guys are very familiar with these games. They are virtual taekwondo and an archery game called Tic-Tac Bow.
Oh, Jesus. Even that name is cringe, isn't it? I know.
And in a great coincidence, these were both developed by the same developer in Singapore called Refract Technology. And Tic-Tac Bow was released not very long ago, has pay-to-win components, and has about 5,000 downloads to date on Google Play Store for Android devices. So 5,000 downloads. So you might be wondering, why would these games be Olympics? This is James Fudge's reporting. So it turns out that the guys who are like the CEO and founders of Refract Technology have ties
Are they on the committee or something?
The Global Esports Federation and the Singapore Esports Association. And so they jammed Tic-Tac Bow, this pay-to-win tic-tac-toe archery game.
Wait a minute. How? I know this is a naive question. I'll be that guy at the beginning of the factor ad. How does one pay to win in tic-tac-toe?
I don't know. What do you guys?
No. What do you pay for the center square or something? What is that? What pay to win component could be in this game? I almost need to look it up for that alone, mate. That sounds mental. I can't handle it. It's so stupid.
Also, apparently Chris Chan, the president of the Global Esports Federation, is also the secretary.
There are way too many people in esports called Chris Chan.
Not,
like,
not the one you're thinking about. Not the Chris Chan you're thinking about.
There's too
Not
many.
Chan
There's too many Chris Chans, Justin Wongs. There's too many. You can't have more than one. If there's one famous one, you can't have two more. You can't do more.
All right. So not Chan Man, but Chris Chan, the current president of the Global Esports Federation, is also the Secretary General of the Singapore National Olympic Council. What a surprise. Which had decision-making powers on the selection of games that were chosen for the Olympic Esports Series. So the reason I'm telling you this, guys, is because, as you can see, it was never a problem of the Olympics. It was a problem of who had money to pay the Olympics to get what they wanted. And in Singapore's case, for this Olympic series, it was, let's have the developers be nepotistically involved and then pay to have their shitty games that nobody played in this Olympic series. And in the case that we're in right now, it is obviously the Saudi Arabian government just footing a massive bill and paying the IOC and then getting the developers on board. Now, clearly that's just more sports washing. Clearly it's just more centralization of power within the industry for Saudi Arabia. But I don't want to talk about that, Thorin. I want to talk about what this means. Like, why does it matter? Because famously, like, nobody has ever given a shit that the Olympics were or were not involved in esports. And I still don't give a shit. But it does offer some interesting things that you guys may not have thought of. So what's your takeaway from this?
Well, I mean, first of all, the reason why I do find it mildly annoying is I get that in League, people don't even remember that WCG 2011 one where they have the, like, you know, fucking chicks dig Elo and all that crap. So the problem is in League, as you'll notice, to this day, people are enamored with this idea, Monty. They find it completely enthralling. But I even saw people like, but imagine like Brazil versus USA. That sounds like the shittest game of League of Legends of all time. Like, you know, if I made those lineups, Monty, and put them in LCS and had them play a best of 3, an only American lineup and an only Brazilian, you'd all boo and not tune in. If I put those lineups into Shopify Rebellion in Immortal Colors, you wouldn't watch that game. You'd wait for Team Liquid Dignitas or something, you cunts. So already it's such a stupid premise because everyone does that thing, as we've talked about on past episodes, where if a country has 3 known players, you act like yada yada yada, they have 2 more anyway, and then they have a team and they're playing Korea. Meanwhile, obviously, I hope everyone can understand that you could send like the Korean 4th team and they would win this tournament and destroy all the Western squads. Like, I don't think people get it that, like, even probably the best one, which off the top of my head would probably be France, if I had to guess, even they wouldn't be anywhere close to like Korea or China. It'd be so absurd. And then lastly, the reason why to me there's not a particular fascination with this is we've actually had this type of tournament in Counter-Strike the whole time. In 1.6, we had a tournament called World Cyber Games that was essentially the Olympics of CS. And then in CSGO, we had one called WESG, which had massive prize money, which was a similar thing. You had to all be from one country. Like, famously, there was even a year where, believe it or not, they actually used to let more than one team go. One year, Virtus.pro, the Poles, lost to the second best Polish team and lost like 200k of extra prize money that they got from this like wacky lot. Yeah, exactly. It was mad. Even though that team wasn't even good. So we've just done it so much in CS that to me it doesn't have some like crazy novelty to it. Like, I can tell you, I don't hate it. Like, here's the thing: if you put a lot of money in it and you do a great format like I like, I'll watch it. But I just think people don't realize the novelty, I think, will wear off really quickly. And even that whole thing that they all say, because here's what I know what they're already doing, Monty. Notice all the people hyped are European. They're nearly all European. In fact, most of them even are French because they'd have one of the best teams. It's an obvious bias, right? When they get hyped, here's what I know they're thinking, Monty. They're thinking this will be just like in football where I get to cheer for the World Cup and Euros and I get to cheer for my team. And even if my team is bad, like I'm from, I don't know, Serbia, I can still cheer because it's about national pride. What they don't realize is this, Monty. You don't cheer in that scenario because football is like the best sport. You do it because it's ubiquitous in your culture. Like, if you're in England, dude, there's loads of women go watch the England games when they're on because it's just what everyone does on that day. If you didn't, here's the analogy for an American. If you don't go and watch the England game when it's on in a bar, you will have that feeling of like everyone else is doing something, like in American high school when it's the big game for college. If you weren't at school that day, all your friends would be doing it. You'd feel like you're missing out. You'd have the FOMO, wouldn't you? Like, oh, I'm not at the game or whatever. So I think people are just thinking, Monty, it's going to be like that in League. But it's like, but it won't be though. Like in League, it'll just have lower viewership No one will care. And it doesn't have any of that cultural component. Like, spoiler, unless he has the most cynical PR guy ever. I doubt Macron is going to tweet about it. Les bleus when like France plays away. Yeah, I'd love to believe it could happen, but I just don't want to. So I think people are.
But he's being.
I think people are getting too hyped. I think people are thinking it's going to be amazing. Whereas I don't hate it. Look, more tournaments the merrier. But I think this will actually end up quite scuffed in its execution. And my joke would be this, Monty. Wait a minute. A tournament in which the only match I really care about is probably the inevitable final between Czechsnots, Team Korea and Team China. I thought we just got rid of that tournament, Monty. It's a pretty good joke. It's a pretty good one. Think about it. Think about it, fans. Think about it. That's not a bad joke. That's not a bad joke.
And also, like, if you are OG, like Thorin mentioned, the World Cyber Games, or WCG. And that was a tournament that was played across a variety of esports. It was very famous in StarCraft. It was so in Warcraft 3, where I come from.
Warcraft as well, yeah.
It was the most important.
3 golds, right?
It was the most important tournament because the Warcraft 3 scene, while it was bigger in Korea than most other places, like it was actually the playing field was pretty even in Warcraft 3. And it was really the time you got to see. It was like the World Championship basically because you got to see the Koreans versus the really good European players, and it was very exciting in Warcraft 3. In StarCraft, it was less exciting because it was just a bunch of Koreans like beating. It was like 4 Koreans that would qualify every year, and then they would just be top 4. So that was less fun, but Warcraft 3 was very interesting. And, 1v1, it doesn't matter if it's nationality based, because the only thing that mattered about your nationality is how many players from that nation you were qualifying to the tournament. That was really the only thing. And oftentimes there weren't enough players, except for Korea or China later on in Warcraft 3, that were good enough to actually compete. Because like if you got the top, if you got Grubby there and Todd and these guys alongside the Koreans and Chinese, you were pretty good to go. So yeah, I mean, like the Europeans would win WCG titles, and it was really fun. So that was kind of the big scene there. So by the way, WCG I think is being run again now, maybe. I don't know. I think it's mostly a mobile gaming competition at this point in time. And the reason behind that is Samsung always ran this, and they ran it secretly for a long time, which was weird. But Samsung was running this competition, and it goes back to the early 2000s. And it was still going till what, 2012, 2013? No, 2013, I think, was the last one with PC games. I was at that one. It was in China.
That was the one that Flynn won.
Yeah, it was actually the Korean team.
That was the last Harav Neo Blaze, as it was called back then.
Yeah, exactly. And they had built this like Chinese super team to win it, and it failed.
Yeah, that was the one that had the bot lane of positive energy, Nami, and whatever the fuck that guy was called. No, here's the hilarious thing, Monty, is people won't even realize what an insane flashback that is to even mention that, because when you mention it, it reminds me, obviously Summoning Insight was around back then. You guys don't know, in the first year, we were obviously learning our skills of doing talk shows. It was a new thing. So if you ever go back, we are just insanely obsessed with like you can have a bingo card and it would have covered like the first year. Like it would always be like TSM versus C9, C9's macro, Reggie's being an arsehole, like Bjergsen's here now, like whatever. Fucking for the Blaze ones, it was always like, why does Thorin hate on Helios this week? What the fuck, Ambition didn't carry enough to help Flame win. Like it was like the same topics a million times over. SKT, they're pretty good. Oh, this Faker guy. Oh, it was fucking ridiculous back then. Although I guess actually the year we started was the year when Faker was dropping off, we thought, with the Ziggs meta and the Xerath picks. We should actually do, I know what we should do, Monty. I've just realized something. I can't believe we never thought to do this before. Do you know what we need to do? We've done all those like anniversary episodes and celebrations of the past and almost like reunion class for the original guests, etc. I know what we're missing. We haven't come, because remember, the original premise of Summoning Insight was to eat Travis Gafford's lunch because he wasn't working hard enough to deserve that lunch. So we need to eat his lunch again, Monty. What we need to do is next time we do an anniversary episode, it'll be for the fans and we'll do a call-in show. And if you're an old school fan, we want you to call in and bring up topics like that and we'll all reminisce on all the cool shit. There you go. There you go.
It's funny. Somebody asked me on my stream the other day if I would do a call-in show, and I said, hell no. But if you want to do it, I'll do it.
No, but that's the one-off, though, because my premise is to do it for the actual old fans, people who used to watch, like, 2016. I think that would be fun if they could bring up what they... Like, the joke is we could even do contests, like when you call in, you enter a raffle by saying which of Thorin's different scandals did you prefer? Was it the one where he implied Reggie was a character from a film that some people thought was incendiary? Was it the one where they called out Lena for her, fucking, whatever, conflict of interest with double him. There's so many angles. Also, I did think of this the other day, Monty. You know, one thing where our branding, we didn't actually keep our branding going, but I feel like we did the right choice here, Monty. You remember that time there was an evil entity in esports? It was called TSM, and it was trying to ruin through lies and manipulation and intimidation tactics everything we held dear, like honesty, truth, a reasonable transfer market, you know, removing like things like nepotism. Well, the problem is our approach was to hyperbolically, we made a theme that we were having a holy war against them. And we portrayed ourselves as Christian knights who were actually battling for the faith to the death against these evil invaders. Now, I've noticed, Monty, we haven't really taken that tack with this whole Saudi approach. I notice we haven't sort of like revived that imagery at all.
That one might be a little dangerous.
I know, unless we never leaned into that. I know, like,
yeah,
even
it's weird.
It's weird that
they
got to us in some ways. They got to
it's
us
weird that we just dropped
all
all the crusade metaphors. I don't know.
It's true. It's true. It was a bit too on the nose. You know what I mean? A little bit too on the nose.
That's too funny. Anyway, about this Olympics event, I will say, like, some of the people that I've talked to about this, and it is true, like, will the question is, like, does this Olympics event, to your point, Thorin, does it matter? Is it going to be cool? Is it going to be a good tournament? The answer to these things is, of course, no.
Oh, surely not. No.
It's gonna suck. You know, Look, I think the World Cup is stupid because it's about nationalism and not about actually the best teams in the world playing. And, you know, it's throwing these national teams together that practice together far less than they do in their clubs. They're objectively worse. Like, a lot of the clubs are just better than any of the national teams could ever be. So I'm not, you know, I just don't give a shit about nationalism to the degree where I'm like, I would rather watch a better or like a worse version of this sport or esport and have all the people playing on this one team. I also don't need it in esports because I get to watch the best Korean and Chinese teams play, and that makes me happy enough, right? So I don't actually want to watch an all French European team. I like watching G2 the way it is, right? In Counter-Strike, I think it's a bit different because obviously in the past you have had a lot of like single nation teams. So perhaps there's a bit more hype there. But in League of Legends, outside of Asia, that's never really been the case. So to me, it's not particularly interesting. But what I've heard from people that is interesting is that they think just the recognition does help with potential sponsors. Like, it may push some sponsors over the edge. Like, if there was a sponsor that was like waffling and then they see this announcement, it does legitimize it for boomers in a way.
It's what you call social proof, essentially. Since it's the same as the concept, Monty, of why everyone wants Nielsen ratings to be in esports, because then the boomer marketing guy who only understands old world TV technology will know what the Nielsen ranking is. So it's the same thing. I know what you mean. If you're in the Olympics, it's a thing where now there's a sort of, again, boomer guy who'll be like, oh, this is legitimate. It's a real thing. And like, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So
just a marker.
I think, you know, I think for the purposes of the teams, it's probably relatively good. And that's all it has to be, really. And also, at least when it comes to dealing with governments, there are oftentimes different laws and regulations for Olympic sports, or shortcuts for government approval of things like visas, for example. Or, you know, in the case of Korea, we know that winning medals at these events can exempt you from military service, which is incredibly important to the actual function of, you know, having these Korean players have longer careers, which is great. Because even though I don't care about this, I do care that a lot of these players are able to not cut their careers short and go to the military. So
people don't know, it's still a famous concept that when people think they have a year where they just can't be on top anymore, many people have quit and just done the military service. And if you don't know, barely anyone's ever come back and been an actual elite LCK. Like, people like Ole have come back to like LCS, but there's very few people have ever come back from the military service and actually either A, tried to be a full-time pro, or B, ever made it again. Most of them, you can imagine, with the whole like, year plus off, depends what service you get. If you don't know, guys, you don't always just like, you can even sort of choose to do the longer one, etc. So no, that's tanked so many people's careers. Also, if people don't know, another aspect that literally, in terms of like the business of esports, will help is I can tell you, actually, that example I gave earlier of Macron, well, remember what he did famously, Monty, was as part of his like election push, he basically inferred he was trying to say like, hey, I'm down with the kids and the kids like esports. So I want all of your esports to come to France, and I put some esports in your esports because I heard you like esports. And he was doing that sort of shit, right? Well, when he does that, here's the difference. What you can now do is actually like put his feet to the fire and get some money from this guy. You go, oh, is that true, Macron? Well, then why don't you support like the French national team in our Olympics, for example?
Sure.
And at that point, you can actually get, just like in sports, remember, there's plenty of like joke sports that none of us give a fuck about, Monty, but they're in the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics. Like, you can potentially get some budget from this guy to like train them up and have a facility or have like a youth program or something. Look, we know it's bollocks. And if you make a youth program for League of Legends, the League of Legends probably won't be around by the time anyone in that could ever have been old enough. And they just won't be that good because that's how it works in League of Legends. But you could potentially get some money out of the government to do this, though. And the difference is if you are like, I don't know, a Carmine Corp or a BDS or something, you could maybe get some cash and actually set something else up. Like, I can tell you, in the UK especially, there will be loads of businessmen in esports going hard as fuck for these sorts of budgets. Because in the UK, we have two things that are like, you can access money for things like esports that are almost a scam on the government. But again, you just play on the perception. So one is lottery money. We have a national lottery in the UK, and famously, the money has to go to like charity causes.
Sure.
So you can do the same thing. Like the obvious one you do in esports with the lottery one is usually more like disabilities. Like, you'd set up a thing where there's like a GLAD center where like disabled kids can go and play, and they play like educational games or something, and you just make it seem like, oh, we're just doing something wonderful for the community. So similarly, I guarantee when this happens, there'll be loads of those like British Esports Federation that'll all be applying for like government fucking grants and shit, again, to set up like a talent pipeline so that we can win in FIFA and Tekken or whatever the fuck games are in that thing. So I actually think, in a way, look, the downside of that is a lot of grifters will get between that money and spend it on absolute bollocks, and it won't do any good. But some of it also might go to some of the people who might do something legit, and then maybe they'll use that facility for something better. Or I think an obvious example that could be cool, that could help us all, Monty, would be if the government just did something like use the money to either build an actual stadium that all esports tournaments could take place in. Like, that would be cool, Monty, if you made an actual stadium where it's like you can host a CS major there, or a League of Legends World Stop, or an LEC final. Something like that could be a clever angle to bring tourism into your country and stuff. So it doesn't all have to be a scam. At the end of the day, it's just like accessing money.
Yeah, and it really just is, like we said, the legitimization of it, and the way that the Olympics are tied into current governments, that does like grease the wheels, I think, for a lot of teams, players, countries, because it's a long-standing thing. So I'm interested to see what this does. Are you going to pay attention to the actual Olympics? Maybe, but probably not. It's probably going to be terrible. But that doesn't mean that the other factors might be terrible.
Even though we won't do it on this one, Monty, because we would have actually check here. But I want you to go and check with some of our sponsors, because I think we could get edgy, but in a cool way. Like, I would love to do a commercial that was like, oh, all this sports washing makes me feel dirty. I need a shower. You know, ask them, Monty. Ask for a future episode, because we can do something straight fire with that. It's a bit touchy. You know, you got to be careful with that one.
I've got one for you that we can do right now, though. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I know you guys, as we switch into regional League of Legends. Now, we've all watched a lot of LEC, and you might say that the LEC was not up to par. But certainly, one of the teams that stank the worst for a lot of this year was Carmine Corp. And how dare you think what you're thinking right now? No, that is a very hurtful stereotype that they're a French team and they happen to be bad at League of Legends, or some might say stank. But
if anything about them stinks in any even metaphorical concept, exactly, yes, exactly.
Just metaphorically, guys, don't think that way. But they've cleaned up their play recently, and they actually are looking like, I wouldn't say good, but you know what? Okay. Compared to the rest of the LEC, pretty good. And potentially one of the better teams in the LEC. And they actually have a chance to get top 3, make the season finals. So that's pretty good. But if you'd like to clean up, you guys can, of course, try some Mando, our newest sponsor. This is a whole body deodorant, not only for your pits, but your packages, your feet, anywhere that smells. Let's go ahead, rub it on there. It is aluminum free. It's not an antiperspirant. It's just a deodorant, but I prefer the aluminum free ones. And Mando has been great, especially for me.
Good. It's all good.
I will make it about myself. Partially French,
Right.
again, unrelated, in descendant, partially French. And I will say, I'm in Korea. It is currently monsoon season, which means it is a very disgusting.
It's humid as fuck.
It is so hot. It is so humid, and it just rains, but it's like hot rain, and it's really unpleasant. And this is the worst time of the year in Korean weather. And I will just say, Mando has kept me feeling fresh in a time where, you know, maybe I wouldn't be smelling so good. So, shout out to Mando. It does reduce sweat, but it doesn't prevent it because it's not an it's not an antiperspirant, right? So you can just use it. You'll have a little sweat, which will cool you off, but it won't stink. You know what I mean? So I've been enjoying it, and you guys can enjoy it too. So basically, you can head on over. They got a lot of different scents. This is Mount Fuji, which is like eucalyptus and citrus. They have like a bourbon leather. Okay. They have like a Clover Woods one. And if you don't like scents, my wife likes the scents. She said they smell good on me. You can go unscented.
They also have loads of other stuff. Like I have a massive block of soap. I haven't actually used the underarm one personally. I have the big soap I use in the shower or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. So you can go get a starter pack. So if you want to try out Mando and see if it's right for you, you guys can go get the starter pack, like Thorin says. And it comes with a solid stick deodorant. They also have cream deodorant, which is kind of like a small lotion that you can rub in instead. Oh, okay. And you get free products of your choice: mini body wash, deodorant wipes, bar of soap, like you said. And free shipping. So we do have a discount code to help you get hooked on your favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That's also in addition to the free shipping, guys. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code summoning at shopmando.com. So there you go, guys. Code summoning.
There are many ways to clean up this summer, but when it comes to using Mando, this is the way.
That's right.
Any likenesses to other franchises owned by Disney are entirely coincidental and not intentional. I'd like to say that legally at the end of that commercial there. By the way, you know, one thing I've realized I actually do low-key love is if people don't realize, not only is the sort of content that Monty and Dora do on Nerd Legion literally what Dora would have suggested as content any time in the last 15 years, but he actually might be better suited to that than esports. And I thought he was really good in esports. Like I've always said, it's not even a meme. He actually is a guy where he's not just like a fan of like Mystery Science Theater. He would actually be better at it than the guys on that show. Like his whole skill set is so on point for that sort of content. And I also just love the way.
Very good.
I also just love the way, if on those shows, if it is anything vaguely to do with Star Wars, the way you treat him with some sort of reverence, as though he's like some like orthodox scholar that's been in the field for like 40 years, and he has to give his take on like what he thinks. I just love the way you give him that like status, because it does work. Like he's sort of the Pope of Star Wars on our show. You know, I love it. It's fucking fire.
So you guys can check it out. Actually, we retooled Nerd Legion, our show, recently, so we're starting to add more watch along content. Okay. So we started to add segments, we started to add watch-along content, which I think Doe is like quite hilarious in. And we cut that up. Our editor, Adanian, cuts that up and puts it into a segment on the show. But we also give you like the MP3 for the full MST3K experience. Oh, wow. Okay. So we just actually recorded the one for the boys this week, the season finale of the boys. And we'll do the season finale of House of the Dragon next week. So pretty fun. We just toss those into the link so you can either see the short form edited with the video or watch along yourself with the episode. But obviously go subscribe to the LFN Culture for that and Foreplay. Also, by the way, those of you guys who are watching the Counter-Strike channel, can you please subscribe to that channel? I see you guys. I see you that it's like 40% of the people are just not subscribed or watching those shows. Like, how are our shows getting like 50,000 views on that channel and we have 20,000 subs? Come on.
Because everyone's relying on that For You page, aren't they? But I agree. You just subscribe already. Just get on and do it. Oh, by the way, in theory, if you subscribe, I actually think it'll make it even more likely for the algo to recommend the show to you. So it will actually even, once you subscribe, just it's one click and then you don't have to do anything else, do you?
I just think it's outrageous because like I look at the dashboard on the back end of those Counter-Strike shows and I'm like, really? Really? So Yeah. Anyway, we're going to head into the Karmine Corp section because this is actually really interesting, and they have been making waves within the LEC. Clearly, nobody, I think, would have expected them. I mean, they got kind of bopped by G2, but then they came back, like, handled Mad Lions, handled SK Gaming, which was a bit of a surprise, and now they really have a chance. So if you guys are unfamiliar with the stakes of the LEC, so basically the top 3 from summer automatically qualify for season playoffs, regardless of how many championship points you have. So even though Karmine Corp actually can't eclipse Giant X in terms of points, as long as they beat BDS, they will actually eject Giant X from the season finals. Mad Lions Koi is already in those season finals just based off of championship points, sadly, and so is SK Gaming. So 5 out of the 6 teams in season finals, G2, Fnatic, BDS, MDK, and SK are locked, and now it's down between Karmine Corp and Giant X. So I will say, Thorin, I love the LEC format in many ways. I hate this, like, summer playoffs that are meaningless into immediately the season finals, because, like, we have playoffs that go into playoffs. It feels really weird, and it makes this summer playoffs feel really bad. But at least there are some level of stakes. Right, at least there's
no, but I know what you mean. Like, the obvious example is this next match. So when Karmine Corp now has to play a best of 5 against BDS, well, on paper, that should be enormous for Karmine Corp, right? If they won that match, that would even imply, like, holy shit, maybe they could be in the final, maybe they go to Worlds. But you could also then cynically just turn around, Monty, and go, yeah, but BDS actually isn't in great form. And plus, in, like, what, 2 weeks, they play the season finals. Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, the stakes aren't the same for BDS that they are for Karmine Corp. Like, basically, Karmine Corp are the only ones that this playoff is mega meaningful for. Everyone else either just is trying to win the title or they don't give a fuck because they just come back for the season final.
Right. And for those of you saying, well, the winner of summer gets a ticket to Worlds. Like, yes, that's true, but you get the 3rd seed. You know what I mean? Like, even a team that wins summer is still probably going to place top 2. And if you get into the finals of season finals, you get one of the top 2 seeds, right? Winner of season finals gets the top seed, second place gets 2nd seed. And then if it's a different team that won summer finals, then they get the 3rd seed. Otherwise, I assume it goes by championship points. I'm not actually entirely sure about that.
I would guess so.
Yeah. But Karmine Corp is interesting because this is a team that upgraded. We can argue whether Closer is an upgrade over Bo or not, but certainly upgraded the solo lane positions, even though, like, Kana is, like, kind of a whatever, maybe not the most skilled Korean top laner anymore. Certainly an upgrade over Kabashard. And Vladi is a rookie coming in, but has actually been putting forward some pretty impressive games on control mages, particularly the Azir that Seiken was fucking tragic at. He was tragic at this champion. And Closer, for a guy that was mostly like a enabler, early game jungler with questionable late game macro on those 100 Thieves rosters, like, late game macro was never really their strong suit, and he wasn't the caller. And, like, we could argue that, does this actually solve any of the issues that maybe Bo was having? Because Bo was very mechanically good, had a deep champion pool, was making plays in the early game, was actually talking more than basically anybody. It was him and Upset that we heard most of the time in the comms that were talking. But regardless, he is having success with this new team. And I think mostly it's like, Vladi is the biggest upgrade. Khan is the 2nd biggest upgrade. Closer is a side grade, probably. I would say a side grade. Maybe
the overall team is way better, though. Is the point?
Yes, the overall team is way better. Upset's playing really well. Targamas, now that he's kind
of.
By the
way, probably the best meta as well. If you are Upset and you've been in a scenario where you can't trust your teammates, and you were like, he's got all the self-sufficient champions. They're all available now, mate. You could just play that shit. Like, if you give Zerian a kill or like Kaiser or something, you're gonna get cooking. Yeah. I think the meta's really good for him right now, mate. It's really good.
I mean, his Ezreal has been good. You get the Zeri back. Like, you get some of these, like, cleanup or hyper carry, 80 carries where he can really perform, that do have a lot of mobility and, like, late game potential. But also, like, a lot of the LEC teams are just kind of falling on their faces these days. And I do have rants about kind of the global meta and particularly the prevalence of Renekton, because this champion is fucking shit. Like, it is so bad in almost every situation it's picked in. And
why do you think they force it? They still think it's good in lane or something?
okay. So I've been curious. So I've had a couple like pro coaches in my stream chat, and I've asked them over the past couple of days, and it's what you would think as far as these people's and my opinion is concerned, which is like it probably is just like a scrim stomper. A lot of the time where it's like, if sometimes the Renekton just wins lane super hard, and then it gets into a position where it can't be stopped, and like, oh my God, it's so great. But it doesn't actually manifest that way in the professional game on stage very often. And also like it's really like the blind picking of Renekton that is so outrageous at the current point in time. And it's also combined with the meta. So the problem, Thorin, is like, Renekton is good into melee heavy compositions, but what's the meta? 2 or 3 AD carries on a team? And also, it's not just any AD carry. It's like a Zeri that can go over a wall, or an Ezreal with arcane shift,
or everything that can dodge away. You can just jump away. Exactly.
She can just shoot him away with an ultimate too.
Yes,
like it's like
true.
Corky, he just Valks away. He's also a million miles away just shooting rockets at you. And then you combine that with the fact, Thorin, that, okay, so we have 2 AD carries. Maybe we have a ranged jungler. Okay, a lot of these ranged junglers, like Zyra, you walk at Zyra and she just roots you. You walk at Brandy, just stuns you. And then on top of that,
that couldn't be worse for this. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so say they have a tank. Let's just pretend they have a tank jungle. What is it? Oh, it's Maokai or a Sejuani. So you try and flank, and they just CC you forever, and you can never get an engage. And what are the supports? Oh, they're engaged supports with heavy CC. So let me get this straight. You try and flank, and the Alistar is there, and he just kicks you out of the fight. Or the Leona's there, and you get stun locked and die. Or the Nautilus is there, and you get stun locked and die. It's like, it is so hard to pull off a Renekton flank. Like, to be frank, guys, it's kind of hard to pull off Kennen flanks right now. It's kind of hard to play these Kennen champions that you should be able to flank with, especially with Flash, relatively easily, and get onto these backlines. But the issue, and I'm getting to how this it interacts with Karmine Corp, because it definitely did in their game. Like, some of the drafting that we saw from SK is absurd. It's just fucking absurd. And it's like, we first pick Renekton in some of these games, or we blind pick the Renekton. And the Renekton...
Which also, by the way, why are we doing that when we have Irrelevant who can play all styles as well? Why are we forcing that?
It's not only that. It's like, okay, so for example, this is what happens when you sometimes pick this champion, right? So if you look at the games that were played between Karmine Corp and SK, so in the last game, they blind pick Renekton. Kana's second most played champion after Renekton is Jace. What the fuck do you think this guy is going to pick in this circumstance, right? And so in these circumstances, you don't even get to dunk on lane as Renekton. You don't even get to dunk on the lane.
Look at this comp he's playing against. He's playing into Jace, then he's against Sejuani jungle. Even the mid is Lucian, by the way. Zeri for the ADC, and then even fucking the support is Alistar, bro. Everyone can escape or push you back.
Yes,
this is mental.
Exactly.
Like, if you're Renekton, all your abilities is just you like grasping, like, please, and you can't quite reach. I can't quite reach. It's going to be mad. It's so infuriating, this game, I know.
And I will say, at least Irrelevant in this game built Stridebreaker and Randuin's, because look, man, I watch a lot of League of Legends, and this isn't just Europe, guys. If you think this is only Europe or NA or whatever, they fucking do this every game in Korea too. It's so fucking annoying
as well.
It's terrible. It is fucking terrible. Okay, it is so bad.
Difference is though, you can sort of get away with it if you are Chicks Notes keen, believe it or not. That's one of those ones where it's not the champion, it's the player, Monty. You know what I mean?
Well,
and he's on Gen G, so you know.
There's just so many ways now that, is the Renekton super good into lane? Like, oh, you could play Gnar into it. Yes. Is there a risk that you get dove as a Gnar with a Renekton on the enemy team? Sure. But we've seen so many Renektons get leads, but then they can't convert because their gold is meaningless, because they can never get into a team fight. They can never actually do anything. They can never flank. They can never get into the back line unless somebody on the enemy team fucks up in terms of their positioning. If somebody fucks up. But here's the thing. All right, so even if you do fuck up, and like Irrelevant in this particular game did actually manage to punish some fuck ups by like flashing on top of Upset and stunning him. But what happens after that is Lucian and Lucian and Jace are still alive. They kite the Renekton, and the Renekton still dies, and then the rest of the team dies. The rest of the enemy team dies. So it really is quite terrible, I think. And this obsession with it. One thing that Spawn, the Team Liquid coach, said to me was he said that sometimes you ban Renekton because it allows bad teams to beat you sometimes because it just randomly snowballs and but in a pro game, right, that just doesn't fucking happen. And if you don't get a big lead, you don't do anything. And even if you do get a big lead, you often don't do anything because you can't push your side lane advantage in the late game. And then you basically just can't participate in team fights. You can't. It's a function of the meta, but now we see so many different champions coming up. I mean, you can think about the series 2 that was played between Fnatic and G2, where this was a big pick, right? And we start to see
Blade was just spamming it all over the place. Yeah.
Well, it was also playing Varus into it, right? And Oscarinen, sure, Fnatic won that final game, but I think that was more of a TF really fucking sucks right now. For the same, honestly, Thorin, for a lot of the same reasons why Renekton sucks, which is you used to be able to just TP into the backline like we used to see T1 do, but in the current meta, if you do try and do that, you just die. You just die. And also, G2 was really bad at using TF ult in that game. So there were kind of multiple layers to this. But there's a lot of punishment that's happening for the Renekton at this point in time. Like Broken Blade was playing it into Ornn, and it's if you fuck up in that lane and you start to fall behind, well, then you're useless, and Ornn just makes a bazillion, masterwork items and ornaments on your team, and he actually does stuff in the late game. So I absolutely loathe this pick right now in probably 90% of the games where it's played. And when we start seeing teams just first pick this champion, I think it is absolute insanity.
No, it's one of those ones, Monty, where I've always thought the weirdest thing about League is because they changed the champions, and obviously the balance is what's relevant, not even just the kit. I feel like when people in their brain have established the narrative of a champion, it just endures for years beyond that being true. Like the obvious other one, Monty, funny enough, is the lane matchup you just described as Jace. How many people are still on broadcasts, bro, saying that narrative of if you could just accelerate the Jace, that's some shit from 5 years ago now, bro. That take is so old. That would be it's a bit I actually do think, by the way, people did this with Azir, where it's not the same lane monster, but people play it like it is. They still pick it a million fucking times. I think pros and coaches sometimes almost default to the old narrative of what something is, because obviously this has been one of the most famous, notorious fucking LS drama bait topics, wasn't it? Is it Renekton actually good or is it fraudulent? And if you remember back then, Monty, even when LS had good points, every single point against him was all the things we just referred to. It would be oh yeah, well, LS, well, if it's that bad, then why does insert the best top? Why does he play it and carry? And it's oh, what does that have to do with it? Or, but look at the win rate in solo kit. They'd always have some weird, spurious reason as to why it was OP. But I agree. I actually think the bigger point you made is, bro, it's actually you almost, as I was joking about there, you almost couldn't design a worst meta of what the entire other team comp is going to be for a champion than Renekton right now into all of this shit. As we just said, you're playing entire teams where there's not one person you're going to lock down. And there's no, it's not you're, they're acting like you're playing against Syndra and shit like that. You just can't get it. Oh, I can't escape. The Renekton's on us. It's bro, every champion can escape or push this shit back or CC it. Because as you say, even if it's Sejuani, bro, that's going to be the easiest ult land of all time when the guy W's in. You know what I mean? You're never going to miss that ever in a million years.
He literally comes straight at you with slice and dice. You know, straight at you. Exactly. and I love it. The Renekton fantasy is oh yeah, I'm doing really well in lane in this melee matchup, and then we dive. I bully him, and then we dive under the turret. But in a meta where there's a lot of range in both the jungle and ranged AD in the mid position and a lot of escapability, you just never get in a team fight the fantasy flank with the massive empowered Q heal. It just doesn't happen unless they fuck up. You never get to you never get to stun anybody important. And if they're playing into you, sometimes they'll do stupid shit walk into you.
Oh, lane, you're going to get kills every now and then. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Just with the kit.
you're going to dive. I mean,
I think you even nailed it earlier with the fact that you said even Kennen can't. Bro, Kennen's the other one. There are so many people in their brain still thinking of my boy Flaming, like season 3, doing a godlike flank where he gets the fucking slice of maelstrom on everyone. But how many times does that even happen now, Monty? Almost never, it feels like. It feels like you're just waiting the whole time for that Kennen to flank, and it never gets the flank off the whole game, you know?
It's even worse, Thorin, because Kennen's played a lot in LPL, and the LPL meta is to build Leandries first, and then maybe never actually build Rocket Belt. So what happens is if you burn Kennen's flash, even if you're playing into, and again, this is LPL meta right now. Let's pretend they have, I don't know, Zyra or Brand and an MF, because like MF is big on the up right now, right? And LPL has been playing more MF than anybody, even though it has been like filtering around the world for very good reasons, which we can talk about. But the misfortune, like, so you're like, ooh, I love this misfortune or Brandon Zyra without flash. I love this Kennen flank, right? But the thing is like, if you build Leandries and then you just build a bunch of AP or magic penetration, is that if you don't have flash, you can't actually punish that ever. So you need the Rocket Belt. And so we just see these flanks that happen with a flashless Kennen where they just don't do anything to the MF or the Brand, and it just totally fails. So, I mean, I know you want it because it's like great for, you know, putting out pressure in the side lane, and like, especially since Kennen is into tankier matchups, like, well, what if he's into a Cassante, or what if he's into a Renekton or something like this? You think it's good, but it ends up really falling on its face, I think, in execution.
Another
and team
problem.
fights.
Another problem you're having here, Monty, is even though the champion might be similar, the game has changed from years and years ago. Like, one of the things you have to say definitely about League is mobility creep is insane. Every fucking modern champion has to have 1 million dashes and jumps, and essentially everyone gets like 2.5 flashes in every kit, it feels like. And then you have, like you say, all those items, Proto Belt, Gale Force, like, bro, like, it isn't 2015. You don't see like, oh, look at this flank I'm about to get, bro. This is like in 2015, the joke is, remember that scene from Austin Powers where that guy gets run over with that steamroller, but he goes really slow and he's going, oh, that's what like a flank's like in 2015. Bro, in 2024, it's like fucking Jet Li in a film or something, like people jumping off walls, like fucking holy shit. How am I ever supposed to land anything on these motherfuckers? It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, or, you know, it's like one of those things where it's like, congratulations, Renekton. You beat Cassante in lane, but now Cassante just takes you to Narnia over a wall, and you just don't get to participate. And it doesn't matter if Cassante sucks, because he just took your entire team's gold lead and just chucked it over a wall. So I don't know, man. I think this pick is just complete dog shit. And like, I don't even know what teams are doing, especially in circumstances like I talk about, where it's like, do you know who Kana is as a player, SK Gaming? When you blind pick the Renekton, Kana's top played champions of all time. So Renekton is number one. And Renekton has, I'm not one of those people who will say Renekton was always bad. Like, when LS was digging at Renekton, he was bad. Like, Renekton was bad and LS was right. Renekton then got good and is now bad again. But it really depends on the meta in which Renekton is played and the status of various items, right, within the game.
I remember at one point in time, it's not a joke, the big giveaway in League, guys, that a champion is broken is always when it goes mid. That actually legitimately was Renekton mid at one point in time, and it could win. It could win games, bro. It definitely has had times when it's been invoked, for sure.
It was a huge lane bully, and when you have like a lot of melee champions within the game, it can be viable. But when, you know, Kana's most played champions of his entire career, Renekton's number one. We know, like, you guys will remember if you're watching D+, there was a time when he was on D+, where he literally had like 100% win rate on Renekton on D+, and you just couldn't give it to him because he would just win the game. He was very good. But his second most played is Jace, his third is Gnar, and his fourth is Kennen. What do you think is going to happen when you pick Renekton into this guy? Like, you literally just have to know him as a player. So I just don't understand why we were picking this Renekton in this scenario. And
I also think, Monty, actually, of all the teams, one of the reasons why Carmine Corp does highlight that some of the other teams have fallen off is, bro, one of the things I would actually give Carmine Corp props for is I actually think they do a decent job drafting for these exact players. Like, they seem to have a very strong, they know exactly who Kana is and when to give Vladdy his pick and what to give upsets. Like, they actually are doing a very good job sort of knowing thyself, as Kiri always says you should do in League, right? But the joke is, that makes them also very predictable. So I'm with you, right? If there's ever a team you could actually sort of see these angles coming, this should have been it. This should just be the obvious one. Like, they're not going to force some stupid top lane pick. They're just going to pick all the strong meta champions, of course.
And like, fuck it, Thorin. Let's pretend that Kana hasn't played Jason. He played Jason game 1 of this series and beat you.
Sure.
In game 1 of this series, 2 games ago, he played it into Kennen. So if he's going to play it into Kennen, what do you think he's going to do into Renekton? What do you think he might do? Just a thought. So I mean, I think it looked very weird from SK Gaming, and that's before we even get into Niski's rather shameful performance in the 3rd game of this series as Ezreal.
We can get to that in a minute, but I've got a whole take on that, mate. But yeah, no. By the way, in general, this series, the reason this series is infuriating is, even though at the end, like, people are going to think on brand, I'm just going to do stuff like praise upset for being good. But by the way, he is. Like, actually, if you were to rank right now ADCs and LEC, wouldn't this guy be like top 3 or 4 at this point? He'd be right up there again. Like, he's had so many carry performances. But bro, that's not even where I would start. You actually do have to start on SK's side and just diss them a whole fucking bunch. Because I agree, not only have they drafted, but bro, how the fuck are they like losing that game 1, for example? Like, mate, this is like you were leading every single moment of every single fight of every, you know what I mean? Like, bro, these guys just throw games. That's why I can see why you bring up the Niski topic. I have to say, Niski has a really weird career arc, bro. Because remember, it went like this. In the early days, if you go to like Envious and LCS and then you go to Splice in the LEC, he's actually sort of like underrated, isn't he? Everyone's sort of like, oh, he's one-dimensional, he's not that good, like he's a bit streaky, you know. Then he has that period with Cloud9 into the European teams when he comes back, Fnatic and Mad Lion. The early man, he's looking good at that point in time. Like, hey, actually, you know what? He's really turned it around. Like, he's sort of like a much more responsible player. You can build around this guy. He can carry. He can get you one of the top teams in the league. He can sometimes, on the right splits, be an MVP candidate, like legitimately. Like we all said, remember, like a year ago or whatever, there was a time period where maybe he should have won for a split. Maybe he was actually the best player, like in their team in Mad Lions. But I'll tell you what, this last sort of like year or two, fucking hell, bro, does this guy just blue balls you every time in the playoffs? Every time he looks so good in the regular season, you know what I mean? And you think, hey, he's ready. He's right there with Captain Humanoid. Yeah, he has a different style of play, different strengths. It's why actually a lot of us, like Kira does this as well, we do compare this guy in many ways with Yagao Monty, because he is also like the jungle whisperer, but also they just never quite seem to match up to the Knights and the Jovies of the world, do they? They always somehow, there's always that gap. But I have to say, the biggest problem with Niski is, bro, it's not even that he just like convincingly is lost. He is such a crazy inter. Because his ints aren't even like, you know what Hillesang int is? Like, he ints from minute 1 to minute 30. Bro, a Nitsky int is like the whole game could be great. Yeah. But then randomly, you pick a moment at like 22 minutes, he will just do a random crazy int. And when I say crazy, I mean almost like what like a rookie level player would do. Like, he'll do some insane face check or blow his flash for no reason. Or even worse, just let someone literally just walk up to him in lane and kill him. Like, holy fuck. Like,
or
for real,
he went...
He went from being a player that was actually like a strong player to like, fucking hell, he seems so fragile, like mentally in these games, bro. He just collapses out of nowhere. Like, people might flame people like Humanoid. Again, to me, Humanoid, like, you can tell he's having a bad game from the beginning of the game. This guy, Niski, it's like out of nowhere, he just has like this fucking fatal flaw, just comes out of nowhere. And now it's become reliable, bro. Because again, this series, SK should have won this series, mate. Like, they had all the pieces too. Like, Carmine Corp's not really better than them if we're being honest. Come on. Are they really?
I mean, Carmine Corp's been improving, and I think, like, I do want to be complimentary of Carmine Corp because they're doing some things very well right now. So they're playing their team composition significantly better. They're much more decisive, and they're all in. Like, Targamas actually... Yeah, I don't know if he's talking now, but he does actually have synergy on the engages that are happening with Closer in particular. So that actually has been a major difference, is that him and Closer are frequently on the same page when it comes to team fighting. He's actually, you know, it could be the meta too, like Targamas playing these engage supports has been a pretty big improvement, I would say. But he's often like following up on a lot of the picks that come in and like really like just snap engaging. And they're forming clear plans. And for example, in the SK game, in the final game, in game 3 versus SK, they realized that if they just didn't let Maokai ult and they tried to burst the Maokai, that they could actually just win the ensuing team fight by like slow playing it with their 380 carries effectively and by letting Upset clean up. So what they were doing was Isma was not, I would say, incorrectly positioned. He was a Maokai in the front line, and he would get hit by a glacial prison and they would burst him super fast so that either he had to use his ult at point blank range, which doesn't leave very long CC because Maokai's ult is CC duration is based off of the duration or the distance it travels, right? So if he does it next to your team, it doesn't do anything. It roots you for a very short period of time. Or they would just kill him before he could ult at all. And at that point in time, there is actually no more counter engage, and they could just kite out the Renekton or auto space the Renekton to death and then kill the rest of the team. And Rahel, if he tries to go into the backline frequently, that's not going to work. But, you know, they were also identifying like, oh, Niski's eing forward and we're just going to kill him and we're just going to all in him. So I would say that the kind of instinctive reactions for Karmine Corp have gotten a lot better, and they're forming a lot better coherent plans in game about how to play their comp and like what their win condition is. So it has been good. I think it's been a big improvement for KC.
Thing is, though, I agree on that whole topic of like the Canna picks, bro. The whole reason they lose that game 1 against Karmine Corp is just the fucking Jace. Like, there's all these fights where they're like pressing, they have the advantage, they're the one making it. But the problem is, as soon as their health bars go down, bro, you're just waiting to see that fucking shock blast come in. It's just killing people left, right, and center, and you're just getting wrecked completely. Like, they couldn't handle it. There's nothing.
Or he just goes in a hammer form and just assassinates somebody.
That is the one thing I would give Karmine Corp credit for. When they were essentially being sort of played into Monty, they actually did some decent team fights, actually. Like, they had some sort of like decent coordination, like you say, like they knew who to go on to and who to like sort of wait to follow up and when to like counter punch. You know, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, and look, they're not flawless. Like, I would say in game 2, for example, I was very confused about why we were not actually using our Taliyah Vi combo to create picks in that game. Why was Taliyah not in side lanes? Why was Closer, like, why is Hui allowed to live into Taliyah Vi is an excellent question. And if you're not going to focus on the mid lane, why isn't Taliyah with Vi in the side lanes, like getting upset super far ahead? And that just never happened. Like, they played pretty badly, I think, in that game overall. But that said, you know, on the whole, Karmine Corp's, you know, the last 2 matches they played that they've won, it has been a noticeable improvement. And Vladdy is a much better player than Seiken. Like, Seiken,
easily.
I mean, his Azir was tragic, guys. Like, he literally was maybe the worst professional Azir player I've ever seen, to the degree that he couldn't even do basic things like summon sand soldiers in a choke point to zone an objective. Like, he was just, I have no idea what was going on with him, but he could not play that champion.
He literally sometimes just didn't even ult, bro. I've seen him just not press R. And just
he doesn't R.
Like,
but I mean, his setups were terrible. It's like, how can you have no pressure right now? You're literally just setting up. Like, why are you why is your sand soldier where it is? Right. Vladdy has been, I think he started out this split much better on like his Taliyah was really good, and like his Azir has been significantly better, and he's like actually making plays. But this is a much more, I would say, aggressive version of Karmine Corp. They seem to have just like committed. I mean, it's a different team, right? They replaced 3 of their players, so it does look significantly better. Is it good enough to win LEC? Obviously not, but for the changes that they made, I mean, you could obviously ask the question, Thorin, why did we have to suffer through this in spring? Because
by the way, that part makes no sense. Because here's
why
what's
was Yamato fired?
If you ask people who are around Karmine Corp, they give an answer which no longer makes any sense. Like, here's my analogy, Monty. You know the reason why it makes no sense for the past 2 weeks for anyone who's left wing in America to go, I think Joe Biden should step down. He has dementia. Because it's like, bro, how could you say that now, but have been fine with him being elected and he was the president the whole time? Like, logically, it didn't just come yesterday, did it? If it was there, it was there.
It's not on some 6-month timer where it's going to kick in after the election.
Exactly. So the question is, why were you cool with that before? Like, I feel like it's the same scenario here. Like, one of the things I have a big problem with in this actual fucking scenario is, like I say, I think SK could have, in theory, won all of these games. They were like leading all the time. They always got the early gun. They even looked like they had the right fucking picks on certain players, but they just couldn't execute. They couldn't win. Right. The real problem I think you actually have is when you get to this next match, when they play BDS, right? First of all, it's a best of 5. It's not a best of 3 anymore. So you have to be better. You have to be able to win 3 games now. It's not that they can't, but my problem is this, is if you look at how much they had, like I say, to almost sort of counterpunch in this SK Gaming series, right? BDS in theory is the team who isn't going to let you do that in those like team fight setups, objective setups. Like in theory, they have been really good at punishing people like that. In fact, I think the craziest thing about BDS is I think they've been whacked this whole playoff, mate. They haven't shown up to any of the series. They're just like limping through. But suddenly they're here again because actually, like I said on Twitter, what's bizarre is, and this does not happen in the West, BDS can play bad and still win the game, bro. That's actually sort of impressive. Like, I'm used to teams having to play, like I've just said, essentially, SK plays well and then they just throw it last minute. Like, BDS can play bad in half the game and still win. So I feel like, unfortunately, I just think stylistically, it's a really hard matchup to win if you're Carmine Corp.
I mean,
it's really hard to win.
I will say for KC, like, one of the issues with BDS is that they're kind of just bad at this meta, which has slowed them down. Like, they are not the best team when it comes to running the AD mid laners or some of the AP junglers, right? Adam's champion pool is like super wacky, right? It doesn't feel good to be Adam like in this meta, basically. And also, I mean, there are things that have transpired where he gets Rumble, which is one of the most, you know, OP champions of the game, and he gets Rumble against Giant X, and like I think that probably has like a, you know, that has an effect. Like, why is he allowed to play Rumble into Sion? Like, that's not allowed, right? I get that Adam sucked at Rumble at Worlds, but he's been better at Rumble this year, and certainly with the current state of this champion, I would not be letting that through the draft. So there have been mistakes, but I think Carbine, like, to me, has looked better in this meta, and BDS has been really, really shaky. So I don't know. I'm not sold on this. I feel like it's probably pretty even. Also, Carmine Corp has something to play for. BDS is already qualified for the season finals, and sure, BDS, you might think, well, BDS definitely, you know, they should be wanting to win the split because that means they automatically qualify for World. While true, I think BDS knows that they're not going to beat both Fnatic and G2. Surely they know that. So I think it's in their head a little bit. And Carmine Corp at least is on, they have an air of desperation about them, right? But on the SK point, what I want to talk about too is like, so Niski's performance on Ezreal and his Eing forward and like that final game was like really bad. And he's just not clutch. When you need Niski to be clutch, like in the most important moments, the question is, does Niski get it done? And the answer is no. And also, if you even say like, what is Niski's best quality at a mid laner? It's that he's a selfless team player. Well, who is he selflessly playing for? Yzma? In this meta? Like, Yzma is playing fucking Sejuani and Maokai. Like, this is the meta where Niski should be enabling a carry jungler to carry. Where is that? Like, if Yzma's not the guy, like, if you can't play Brand and have Niski help him, what the fuck are we doing here?
You would also think, if you think of the mid lane champion pool now, Monty, it should be dope for Niski. These are exactly the sort of like roam, play for other lanes, help the jungle of champions. It's loads. But, I forgot the point. I didn't actually connect the point I was going to make earlier. The Biden point was supposed to be about Carmine Corp playing with the same lineup in spring, right? The point I didn't make was this, right? Obviously, you already knew they were washed by the time spring came, right? But I was told behind the scenes, it was some sort of loyalty thing. It was like, oh, but you know, they were in the ERLs for so long and they could have left. So what they told them is they had to, well, then let them play fucking summer as well. That doesn't make sense. If for that premise to make sense, then they'd have to play out summer as well. Right. Then you go, right, there you go, Saken. I know you didn't do well, but we gave you your in LEC. Instead, what you've done, because essentially, Monty, the obvious question is this, bro, if we make these changes, but in spring, couldn't this actually have been like the 4th best team by now for real? You know what I mean? Like, they could have, like, think of the level up if they'd have had one extra mini split. Because also on the Niski point, here's what I was going to connect to, I forgot to before. Bro, it's not just in LEC playoffs, although he's had a lot of bomber games there. If you also now just look historically, Monty, this guy's international record is just a record of failure. This guy's on all the teams that bomb internationally. He's just become a crazy choker. I don't know what it is. Because I feel like that, like I said, I feel like there was a period in his career where it wasn't as clear like that. But now it's become like a ridiculous, like idiosyncratic failing of his, hasn't it? It's just something there in his game for some reason.
But the important games he just doesn't show up in. And it's like, if he can't carry and he can't be that guy, that's okay. But Yzma needs to be that guy because that's why you hire Nisqy, right? And
he's also got a jungler that's true, a rookie, but also very fragile, mate. Also just collapses completely.
But Yzma needs to be taking the steps. This is it. This is the end of his rookie year. If he is not at the point in a meta where Nisqy, the most jungle enabling mid laner in the league, in a meta where jungle can carry, if they can't play Brand, if they can't play some of these AP champions, what the fuck is the point of this team? Like, you must get rid of Yzma is the answer.
Like, we can't be in a world where you have Nisqy, but your champion pool is Sejuani and Maokai. Like, what's the point of that? You know, I know, like, that's what we said earlier. Just give him Bo, for fuck's sake. Like, Bo would be on the Italy right now, carrying these games. Exactly, I know.
Bo would be firing this team. And, like, honestly, SK has been doing some good moves. Like, Rahel and Luan were good finds. Like, they are good players, and they've had an impressive, like, start to their time on SK Gaming. Those were really good pickups. But Yzma, look, you can't win them all with some of the new players. Yzma's a wash. The problem you have if you're SK is that you can't import a jungler. So that I don't think they can get Bo because they have this Korean bot lane. So you have to get a domestic bot laner. And it's like, can we get Razork out of Fnatic, maybe? Can we get Elyoya out of this shit-ass version of Mad Lions? Like, can we get a real jungler in this team? Because, like, some of these things might be actually interesting. But with SK, like, Yzma can't be it. And, like, it's illegal to lose in this way in this meta with a Nisqy team. You have to try. And that just says to me, Thorin, that Yzma can't do these champions. He can't play them. So if you can't play them, then what's the upside
as well? Team? Think about this is how quickly you can narratively build a team up, but then take them apart. So think of how hot SK looked coming into the playoffs. But now consider that if we run down all the narratives, Monty. So the bot lane are rookies anyway. Nisqy fucking chokes. Yzma's mega fragile, isn't playing the meta champions that are strong, and they put Irrelevant on fucking Renekton. It's like, well, I can see why we lost these games now. The fuck? What's it? What did this is my mean joke. What did they let the GM of Rogue play coach for a day? That's a bit mean, but whatever. You see where I was going with that one.
Yeah, look, and also on the Carmine Corp point, now we just have to ask the question: why the fuck was Yamato fired? Why? If Yamato wanted to make roster changes and you did it, and this was the, maybe, I don't know what Yamato suggested. Maybe Yamato suggested getting these players.
By the way, I want everyone to activate their eye test. Don't just tell me the records or look up what people said about Carmine Corp. Go watch Carmine Corp in winter when Yamato coached them. You know what I'll tell you right now, Monty? They were better actually in winter than they were in spring. If you go watch them in winter, they have a load of early games where they get ahead or they have kills on like upset, for example, and they're in like
they were throwing a lot.
They just don't ever win a fight is the problem. They just seem to lose every fucking. They even lost a mad one to Mad Lions themselves. Like they lost to so many shit teams. The difference is there was something there. They just could never get it together, bro. Like I agree with you. That actually implies consider we now know that 5-man lineup was one of the worst to ever play in LEC. Actually, that implies Yamato didn't even do that badly with them. Like he almost got the most he could have gotten out of that 5-man lineup. Because when you then replace the entire top side and with like known players that are all met. Like, by the way, Canna and Closer couldn't be more of a known quantity. Like, it's like when fucking Giants signed the Antonio. You weren't signing him to be a fucking Fiora carry top laner, were you? You knew exactly why he said. So I agree with you. Why is the Reha guy allowed obvious band-aids that fix the team and allow upset to carry? But Yamato has to sit there with what we've just implied are almost like Nepo babies in the fucking solo lanes. And as they lose the game, I've even heard, by the way, you ready for the Ultimate Nightmare? I've heard it's true that before the season they were even winning some scrims and they weren't even that bad. Like, he's then supposed to be a bozo because he's not allowed to change players and they lose loads of games. Like, I think that's aged poorly, by the way. I agree with you. Now, look, we have an obvious disclaimer, I will say, which is we actually work with Yamato Cannons. We have bias. But I would go the other way. I would say we work with him because he's really knowledgeable about League of Legends.
Yep, exactly.
You fucking idiots. Not the other way around, is it? We didn't go, well, since we're friends, better put him on the show too. Like, no. Guess what? He's really good at thinking about League, isn't he? I even think, by the way, he's one of my favourite people, genuinely, Monty, when he does like the coach-style play defense for players that aren't even his players. I think he's really good at it. I think that's actually a real big strength of his, you know, coming up with another angle. I think people don't realise. I'll give Yamato his flowers in the biggest way possible now. Yamato, in something like 2 sentences, managed to explain what people like LS and Dom have never been able to explain about like Asian regions being better. You know, that whole thing he came up with, that lens of like proactivity and activity versus precision. And the idea was the LCK team went for ultimate precision, therefore you have less moves you make, but the LPL team went for maximum activity, so the precision didn't have to be as good. The way he explained that in a very, very easy to digest concept, that is genius, Monty. Like that level of communication skill is so lacking, because even people like Dom and Ellis, who in their own ways can be brilliant, they would essentially have to talk around that topic for weeks and weeks and months.
Sure.
And examples like this guy just cut through the whole thing. It's that, and everyone who understands that concept, it's a brilliant concept, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think like this Carmine Corp team is like, what was the point of like doing virtually anything that they did? Like, I'm glad they're better because the region as a whole has been bad and we haven't seen a lot of growth.
They have the activated fan base. Like, that's a good thing. We want teams that people give a fuck about.
Yeah, I mean,
by the way, we can do it in a second if you want. But do you even want to address that whole Caedrel? Like, you will boo my goat. You didn't see that whole drama on Twitter.
Oh yeah. Sure,
it was so stupid. It was unbelievable. Do you want to talk about it? Sure. Basically, because obviously in that off season last year, there was that whole thing where like Carmine Corp did that like what Red Bull event or something where they had T1 come over in G2 and all that. Yeah. And if people remember, obviously like that in itself was a bit dodgy that T1 did it anyway because they had just won fucking Worlds. And you're like, bro, can I get a week off? Like, no, Faker, you must now go to play pointless show matches against fucking Carmine Corp. I know. So anyway, obviously the premise is anyone who knows Carmine Corp fans, obviously their whole thing of their fan base is they're like a football fan base. They're incredibly biased in favor of their team and they boo you if you're on the other team. So what happened was some like ultra or something, some like hyper Carmine Corp fan, I'm assuming was the person, sort of made a tweet that was sort of like, you know, we want to boo Faker when he comes to this arena and there'll be like 15,000 of us or something. And Caedrel did the craziest like fucking pearl clutching, like, yeah, you are a disgusting creature who wants to boo the goat. He's the goat. The goat. Like Caedrel actually, like, it's such a weird take because here's what, I don't know if you know this, Monty, but actually, he actually inadvertently stepped into a really classic Richard Lewis take that he won't know, which is one of the contrarian takes Richard has, but I think it's a banger, is he actually thinks no matter what you think of fans and tweets and how annoying they are, if someone pays their money for the ticket, which in theory should be the lifeblood of our industry, but it isn't, they can boo someone if they want to. If they don't like you and you're the star player, that is their prerogative. They paid to either cheer the player they like or boo the one they don't. Remember, we're not saying like run onto the pitch and assault them or DDoS. We're not saying it. We're just saying you go to the arena and the kid who paid, if he's a French guy or a Carmine Corp fan, even if you are, gasp, the GOAT of League of Legends, they can boo you too. In the same way, by the way, as people could boo Michael Jordan when he went and played the Celtics, or you could boo Tom Brady when he goes to any other fucking team. Well, any other team is a joke with him, but you know, you can boo all these people. It's actually legitimate. So I want to know what you think of this, because I found it to be such a weird take. Like, he almost tried to infer that you're just not allowed to boo Faker or something. Like, I found it a really weird take. I get the idea it wouldn't be nice for Faker. I understand that. I understand that, Caedrel. I get it, mate.
I mean, I think there's a lot here. Like, obviously the KC fans are unhinged and like need to be reined in, but like obviously Caedrel's not going to rein them in, and chastising them about booing Faker isn't going to rein them in, because why would mentioning that make them stop doing it? Like, what has to happen is KC and Kometo have to say, cut that shit out, guys. But they won't, of course. They won't.
Which is weird, because I'm always told by Caedrel Yamato that that Kometo is just the best guy ever. Can't ever just say, guys, since you're all my fans, can you just be nice to everyone? I notice he never does that, Monty. Not just because he doesn't want to, you idiots. He loves this fucking like rabble-rousing effect. It's fucking crazy. Does. Also, I'll just throw this out there, Monty. The reason why I love esports is because no one ever has self-awareness. Right, Monty, I'll ask you a series of questions. Which fan base, obviously, as an overt partnership, does Caedrel have a relationship with currently?
Fnatic?
Oh, so the T1 fans of Europe, you mean? Oh, AKA the TSM fans of Europe, right? And do you remember, Monty, there was a tournament. I'm going to take you back in time, sir. Do you remember in 2015, we had Worlds in Europe? Do you remember?
I do
Fnatic, do you remember that same Fnatic?
I do.
That silly old Fnatic was playing against a team called Coup Tigers. They were from Korea. And you, one of the best commentators in the world, went up there and implied you thought Coup Tigers would win. Now, explain to me, Monty, what did Fnatic fans then do in this arena?
They booed.
Oh, they booed you. Wait a minute. You mean Fnatic fans took one of the best in the world and just booed him shamelessly?
And then I made a fire skit out of it where I said they were saying coup for Coup Tigers and they were supporting coup.
Legit.
So they're saying coup, and then I started chanting coup with the crowd, and it was great. Yeah. So I don't care about being booed because I find it entertaining to be booed. I like being the villain. It's fun.
Yes. But I did just think that was certainly deliciously rich, wasn't it? Like, come on, Caedrel. Mate, you're a Fnatic fan, you fuck. What do you think they're like? They're the most annoying assholes.
Also, that was the same year where Fnatic fans were like sending me death threats on Twitter because I dared to say that I thought Coup Tigers were better than Fnatic, and even though I said I thought Fnatic was a very good team, and that was also the year in 2015 where 2 European teams made semifinals of Worlds. It was a very good performance from Europe overall, very good. And I certainly was very complimentary about both Fnatic and OG, the 2 teams, throughout that entire tournament. But yeah, it was. Fnatic fans have notoriously been the worst. It's true up until this point. Now they are no longer the worst. Shall we talk about Fnatic and G2? Because obviously it's going to be a surprise when we have G2 coming off a top 4 finish at MSI to see them in this current meta. And especially a surprise because, as we've seen from Fnatic, they are rarely able to deliver 2 good performances back to back. That's been somewhat of a rarity. I will say that
it's still hard work in this series, though, mate. I tell you what, even if G2's off their game, fucking hell, they make it hard to win the game.
They can still come back.
Fight from behind,
Yes.
Whereas there are other teams where they should win the game off this. You can't say that against G2, mate. They're always in these fights somehow.
Yes. They are very good at playing from behind. They're very good at turning things around if they have to. It is always scary, I think, to be playing them. But also, look, I think there was some overcooking with the drafts here. When we think about this Varus top lane, and sure, did it get a lead in game number 2? It absolutely did. Was it very...
Broken Blade overcooked like a motherfucker in this series, didn't he? Come on, bro. Come on.
He was going way too deep with some of these champions, getting himself caught out. And it's if you want to transition that lead from a top lane Varus, you can't just randomly die later on because you need a gold lead in order to push the advantage, right? And if you end up dying and you're playing against a team composition that can front to back super well because they have Cassante, Sejuani as frontliners and you have 380 carries, it becomes really hard to play. Also, shout out to Jun because one of the things I didn't understand was that they picked the top lane Varus into the Bard. So the Bard had already been picked. And I was watching this draft and I was thinking to myself, wow, it sure is going to be hard to hit those Bard ults against Lucian and Kai'Sa. And then they just pick Varus. I'm like, well, it won't be hard to hit that Bard ult into that, right?
Yes.
So I have to say I was a little bit confused. They did go ahead and win with it later on, and it is absolutely dominant when it comes to the laning phase, right? And Broken Blade did have some good laning phases during this best of 5. I don't think TF is really very good anymore. I think a lot of the champions, like I said in the meta, that prevent Renekton from getting flanks also prevent the TF from actually engaging and porting into the backline and CCing one of the carries because he himself just gets chain CC'd and died. And this is the reason why we've seen T1 slowly pivot away from just blinding TF every game, right? But even then, the TF ults were really bad. He didn't really reposition with it. They were trying to play some weird front-to-back style of compositions and failing a lot of the time. So I do want to credit Fnatic, and particularly Razork. Razork's Italy game was really good. to close out this series, and he was much
as if
more
you
the
needed
reason.
proof this guy is world class. Like that
Yeah.
game shows you, mate.
Yeah, and the Razork performance there was much more the reason that they won than this like blind pick Renekton that they took in the top side, which just wasn't it.
I've got a question for you about the meta, Monty. One of the other factors I think about this specific meta right now in summer that isn't as good is, bro, when you have teams where sometimes there are team comps, Monty, where it is literally 4 ADCs. I mean, bro, you can even have top lane ADC. You could have 5 ADCs in a game. That just doesn't look that great in team fights. Like, I actually have a hard time. Like one of the things I always loved about the old 5v5 team fights with distinct roles, AP, mid lane, AD, is who to watch at what time in the team fight. Like, this is just, it looks like hungry hippos. People are just fucking spamming shit like, oh my god, the health bars. Like, what am I watching right now? What am I watching?
It's even better, Thorin, because then what happens is it's like whoever like on average has the better range is the team that has the better composition. So you end up with like teams that each have 2 to 3 AD carries, and it's like, well, this team slightly outranges this team, so now this team is just gonna win because when they're poking each other in the neutral, like they're gonna be able to space just a little bit further away and hit their poke. It is dumb.
It's not the greatest play. It's not that enjoyable. Let's just put it that way.
Right. And also, at least, some of the regions are on 14-14. So Korea and NA are on 14-14 right now. But in LEC, they're still on 14-13. And what this means is the changes to Warmogs haven't come through yet. And this Warmogs meta is so fucking stupid, guys. And by what I mean is like Warmogs first on the jungles and supports on like, I guess not always on jungle.
Argue, by the way, Warmogs is why Carmine Cop won that third game, mate. Like after that, SK just couldn't fucking do anything.
So Warmogs is really dumb, particularly first on supports, because you buy it on these tanky supports. And the reason why we see more flat HP is because flat HP got stronger, guys. It got stronger because after MSI, they nerfed, they changed, Kraken Slayer, or they like Blade of the Ruined King, cut down all of these items that were functioning. Like a lot of the items or runes that had max HP damage, percentage max HP damage got changed or got nerfed. And so all of a sudden flat HP becomes more valuable. But the thing about Warmogs that's really egregious is just the passive on it, which allows you to regen all your HP, which means that if you watch games with these Warmogs, either Zeke's convergence into Warmogs Sejuani in jungle or Warmogs first on like every single fucking support in the game, is that Warmogs timings are extremely important because that means you get vision control. Because if I can walk into a brush as a support, take a bunch of poke damage from 280 carries, clear out the brush or get a ward in, and your support walks in, doesn't have Warmogs, it gets poked and the poke sticks, and you can't just walk out and regen 3,000 HP on your Sejuani in like 10 seconds or whatever. It makes a massive, massive difference to the war over vision control and objectives. So if one team has 2 Warmogs and the other team has no Warmogs, it's really fucking hard to win a game of League of Legends. And it's a really dumb power spike. So I do appreciate that they're changing it. But it has meant like first item Warmogs power spike or second item in the case of junglers, tank junglers, because you're going to get Leandry's first on Maokai because you need Faded Ashes to clear, finish Leandry's, and then you get Warmogs most of the time. It just makes the game like really stupid. And I really dislike it because the power within this item basically gives you carte blanche to like face check almost anything. And it's a huge issue. So we're going to keep seeing that in LEC playoffs, right? Which is disappointing.
I have a topic we could obviously talk about. It's just an obvious one. Monty, do you want to know what's mad? This is why I hate that you didn't ever have the open circuit after season 2 in League of Legends, because it means the narratives get too crystallized when they're not legit. Like if someone wins a split, you have to wait like a month and a half before they play another playoff, or they go to a national tournament, maybe it's a month away, etc. So what you never know is like what's form that was just for that week and what's form that's like for that 3 months. Like it can sort of mask that and seem that way. Bro, it is literally only 3.5 weeks since T1 won the Esports World Cup. T1 now can't beat anyone. Anyone. Like Hanwha Life actually is
T-Rex?
dunking on these motherfuckers. It's actually embarrassing, bro. Like they're in really bad shape right now, mate. It's crazy, isn't it? It's fucking crazy the shape they're in, mate. Because if you think about it, right? If like look, they'll probably almost certainly still snatch a playoff spot, etc. But like, mate, I know people have called the end of T1 many, many, many times, but if they turn it around now, like,
It's a bad
I'll be
meta.
very impressed, mate. I'll be very impressed.
I do want to talk about T1 because obviously, them losing both their matches is really important, especially because they lost to BNK.
Recently they lost to HLE as well. They lost what, 2 times in like a week and a half or something mental.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yeah, and the first time they probably should have won. The second time they got completely like 360 dunked on by Hanwha Life. So, I mean, it was not close series. They were just egregiously inting a lot of the time. But I will say, if you are like T1 and going, traveling abroad, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe another country, who knows? Just for this example, if you're traveling abroad, maybe you're using some of that airport Wi-Fi. Maybe you're in a country where, I don't know, data privacy isn't so great. You probably want our sponsor, ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is delightful. And I basically always have the app running on my phone because in Korea, at least, I'm constantly moving out of different public Wi-Fi zones because it's absolutely, everywhere in Korea, on the buses, on the subways, in the coffee shops, anywhere you are. So it's really easy just to have that app either on your laptop or on your phone. Get that security that you need. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. And basically everybody needs a VPN these days, guys. Everybody's on these public networks. As we've said, also, it's very useful if you guys are watching shows or movies along with us on the Culture Channel, because you'll have access to different films on the services you already pay for if you change your geolocation, which has been very useful for me as well. But it also, just for security reasons, it is way cheaper to have the VPN than deal with the massive headache of your data being stolen and then having to try and fight that battle over your, I don't know, social security number, potential access to your accounts. It's just a pain in the ass. So just avoid that entirely. And it is incredibly easy to use. It's literally like one button on your app. I am using it right now while we record this show, and I'm uploading in HD on 2 different streaming services, Twitch and YouTube, simultaneously. So the speed is great. No issues there. Works great with the streaming services. Keeps you secure. I use it constantly. So secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/summoning. That's expressvpn.com/summoning. And you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/summoning. So if you're planning on traveling to maybe certain countries that probably shouldn't have your data, not saying it was the Esports World Cup with T1, but there are many such countries out there. Maybe get this. Even if you're just in the airport, probably a good idea. So thank you to ExpressVPN. T1. Also, shout out to ExpressVPN, who has the T1 colors, the red and white. Very pleasing for us moving into this next segment. They came off this loss, as you mentioned, Thorin, to Hanwha Life last week. It was not super convincing. A super convincing loss in that they had winning states in all 3 games and could have absolutely won this series, but ended up kind of throwing it. They did drop a game to Breon when they came back, but it was Wednesday. They had just gotten back from Esports World Cup. It was in, I kind of forgave that one. But then we get to this.
It's the FearX one that got to you, isn't it, Monty?
It's the FearX. Well, I mean, they also got.
They aren't a good team, mate. They are not a good team.
I mean,
I don't care what anyone says.
I will say, FearX did beat both KT and T1 this week, so we can't shit on them too hard.
Sure.
We can't shit on them too hard. They actually are on a pretty legit winning streak.
Just go look at the roster, though, guys. These are like a bunch of never were's. Never mind, what haven't been yet. None of these players are going to be anything.
I mean, I think Closer is a bum, and I also think that Clear. I don't understand what's going on with Clear because he was dog shit for most of this year and is now just having the best week of his life. He actually looks really good. So I don't know what's going on at FearX, but what I do know is that we just watched them beat T1, and T1. The joke I made on the Monty and Wolf show about their match versus FearX was that So we see T1 come in and they're like, hey, guys, oh shit, how did Top Esports beat Gen G? We can never beat Gen G. How did they do it? Oh, they played Tristana, Ivor, and Ezreal. Let's just do that so we can learn how to beat Gen G. Then they try and use these champions, and they are just terrible. They're terrible with these. Like, Guma's a bad Ezreal. Faker is the worst Tristana in LCK, just abhorrent. And
that thing I said on the past episode about him having a champion ocean has aged so badly. That's such a bad take.
He played 3 Trist games in this series and lost 2 of them. I mean, this is coming off
Which,
of performance.
remember, if Caps just even locks in a Trist, every European fan's like, it's a broken champion. Then your GOAT plays it and it looks trash, mate.
Not only that, but he like straight up threw the game against Hanwha in the 3rd game on Trist. So yes. This really has not been the pick for him. And Owner might be a perfectly serviceable Ivern player. I mean, they did smash game 2 of this series, like mega smashed Firax. Like the most dominant game was T1 beating Firax in game number 2. I mean, game 1 was pretty dominant or game 3 was really dominant from Firax. I mean, there were a lot of one-sided games in the series. To be fair, all the games were one-sided, but T1 did absolutely destroy them with the Trist and with the Ivern. But it doesn't really speak to T1's strengths. This meta. First off, the 80 carry champion pool is so bad for Gumayushi.
That's all right, and it's going to expose Faker too, mate. You'll see.
He is a shit Kai'Sa player. He's a shit Kai'Sa player. He is not a good Zeri player, and he's not a good Ezreal player. And Faker's been trying to play this Tristana and really hasn't had a lot of success. Zeus has been scrambling around to find some picks to play at the top side, but
bad in some of these games, mate.
Zeus has not looked good. He looks really off his form right now, and Keria, I think Keria had a very good Esports World Cup, but hasn't looked super strong domestically this split. And it's been really, I think, very disappointing to watch T1. I do think a lot of this is the meta, and maybe it's burnout as well from traveling to these events, because T1's just been going, right?
Oh.
I think one of the issues with T1 is, like, ever since this roster was assembled, Thorin, they haven't had a break. Like, if you actually just think about it, it's wild, the schedule they've had. Plus, Faker's been injured, right?
There was those few weeks they took off last year in the summer, but aside from that, yeah, true. They technically did turn up, but
the injury break. But I mean, if you literally
basically, it's the same concept, Monty, as to why, like, basically in sports where you play a lot of games, like the famous examples of ice hockey and basketball, if you have like a dynasty, the reason it ends up getting cut short isn't even that you're not that good anymore. It's just that in like 4 seasons you've played like an extra half.
I mean, just
of like playoff games. Exactly. Yeah, you're just going too deep.
I'm just like, if you guys actually think about it. So this roster started in 2022. What happened in 2022? Go to MSI. Literally play through the finals. Yeah, every final. They play into the finals at Worlds. So they play the longest you could play at MSI, the longest you could play at Worlds. Yep. Okay. Then we come back 2023. Once again, like, okay, so they don't make it to the finals of MSI, but they have a deep run at MSI. Then they
were in both domestic finals. So again,
they were in both domestic finals. Yeah. They then go to the world finals. They go all the way to the world finals and win. Then, as you mentioned earlier, they go to France and play this off-season tournament. And this is like in the middle of Faker's injury and everything like that. And then we get to this year. Okay, so this year, oh, they're in the finals again of spring, right? And it's a grueling finals. It's a 5-game banger. And then we go to MSI, right? Obviously not a great MSI for T1, but they're still there. Then they go to Esports World Cup. Oh, they play the maximum number of matches at Esports World Cup as well. Then they come back to Korea and I would assume are still the favorites to be in the finals of this one as well, despite their current losses. So, I mean, it has been absolutely brutal because it's not like they have fresh players that they substituted in. It's literally just these same 5 guys, except for when Faker was so injured he couldn't play the game last summer. And they have played basically the maximum amount of tournaments. They played optional tournaments. They played the optional Esports World Cup. They played the optional, like, Red Bull Proving Grounds thing. I mean, some of these may not be optional because Red Bull's a sponsor of theirs. And also, I know the teams don't want to present this, but the Saudi government is a sponsor of theirs. That's what being a partnered team with Esports World Cup means, guys. They have a Saudi sponsorship. And so they do kind of have to go to these events. But it's hard. And I think it would not surprise me if this group of players was burnt out. And especially because, Thorin, they are the reigning world champions. Like, they accomplished this goal with this roster. If we're being honest, this roster probably should have been blown up at the end of Worlds. And you might say, well, why would you do that? And the answer is because this shit happens, guys. You need to inject. This is just how esports works. If you are an esports GM, it's not like a lot of sports rosters where you don't blow it up. Like, oftentimes you have to blow it up because you have to, like, inject freshness into these rosters. Otherwise, they get stale real fast.
I also think if you just look at it, Monty, the reason why you should have blown this roster up is it's the old saying, quit while you're ahead. You fucking won Worlds, bro. Like, in a year when JDG and Gen G looked mega strong, you won Worlds anyway with this scuffed lineup. Just quit while you're... That was the best case scenario. Like, the problem always this lineup had, Monty, was they weren't the best even in Korea unless it was their meta or they created their own meta. What that infers already is you're sort of like band-aiding your own fucking team, even though you've played together now 1 million years. Like, this lineup's been together an extremely long time. I mean, if you take off Zeus and you just make the core, they were together the year before that as well. Like, this lineup has played together so long. Like, all these things that people are going to complain about that manifested in these series, Monty, were there the whole time. They just didn't always all come to bear at once. Like, oh, could Keria have metas where he's just a normal support and sometimes absolutely. He could also have the ones where he leads the whole world and no one can play what he plays. Can Zeus be a really strong top laner who looks like the best in the world? Yes. Can he also get dunked on by Doran every fucking time they play, seemingly, and bizarrely just get shit all over and get no kills? Yes, that does happen. Can Faker be really good when he has a couple of champions that are right within the sweet spot of the meta and he can play like his Zhao Hu floor general style? Yeah, but when it comes to these ones where you have all these broken champions that you actually have to really carry out of, he doesn't do it. Like, and then by the way, the guy I feel the worst for, because Gumayushi, I'm sorry, Gumayushi, you can't play like 3 of the strongest ADCs. Maybe you're not supposed to be in the same conversation as Ruler and Viper, mate, because they just have to play whatever's OP, mate, and they play all those champions. And the guy I feel sorry for, though, is Order, the guy who I think should have been the MVP of EWC, because, bro, he is not being given a chance by T1. Not only is he in games now, Monty, where there's no winning lanes. Imagine this Hanwha series, these 2 Nidalee picks. Good fucking game playing from behind on those picks, my dude. Like, that looks like a nightmare draft to play into if you're Order, mate. What are you doing?
And in the Hanwha game, like, that was a good example of Renekton played well by Doran, because you see, the thing is like, if you can get control over the Gnar lane and push him in, the dive potential is there. Nidalee is great at many things. Nidalee is really bad at countering dives, like really bad. And so when you have a Gnar that's getting abused in the top lane, the Nidalee can't do anything to stop the dives.
No agency at all in this game, did he? What can he do?
Like, you can't stop a dive as Nidalee. Like, that's not a thing that happens. So Zeus was just like pummeled into the dirt in that game. And that was a game, like, I'm not saying every Renekton game is bad, guys. I'm saying that blinding Renekton into players that obviously play Renekton counters and then can construct complete anti-Renekton teams. And it's not like it's hard to create an anti-Renekton team in this meta. Anti-Renekton teams naturally occur whether Renekton is picked or not. That's the problem, right? The meta is Renekton is biased against Renekton, so you have to be deliberate about Renekton. And sure, there are some really good Renekton combos. Renekton Nidalee, Renekton Zyra. Setting up for these long engages can be very useful, right? Renekton Sejuani. But you have to have a plan about how you're either going to beat the top laner or the top side of the map into a pulp in order to win, or, right, you just then Renekton is useless, right? So I think
also, by the way, so obviously what's great about this Hanwha life too is this, Monty. All the people who get all the hate on the forums were exactly the ones dunking on T1. So you know that boy, it's that boy, fucking Zika, didn't even die this series. You know, Peanut, by the way, Peanut's actually fucking smurfing this split. Like, he was mega. He just dominated in this one. And then even Doran, who everyone loves to dunk on and say he's shit, tell you what, like, Zeus must owe him fucking money. Did he pull Zeus out of a burning car, give him his kidney or something? What the fuck is this? Every time he plays him, Zeus just becomes like a fucking Padawan. What is this shit? By the way, I think actually the one, like, I want to... Your boy Peanut was actually fucking... He was mega in this series, mate.
He was mega in the
just
Poppy
plastic.
as Poppy. He was mega as
If you
Poppy
put
in the
him
first series too.
domestically in Korea, he is the master, mate. He just schools people. He just fucking schools them.
Well, also, this is the Vi Talia game that you want to have, right? Like Vi's banned and like you have the synergy between those champions. That's why I'm confused when I see Vi Talia in Europe and it does fucking nothing. And then I watch Hanwha Life just completely destroy T1 with Vi Talia. This is a good meta for Zika, though. Like, this is a great meta for Zika. He's gotten better at champions like Azir and Talia. And then he's always been good at AD mids outside of Corki. But the thing about Corki is, hilariously, he's now even good at Corki because Corki, all the things that Corki did that Zika sucked at, like playing around package, he can now just be a lane bully. And he's great. And I mean, you even said Viper. Viper has been the best player in the league.
That just
these
goes
past
without
2
saying.
weeks.
At this point, that goes without saying. Once
Like,
water's
Viper is
wet, the forest scream, and Viper's the best. We all know that. We all know that.
Yeah,
It's also his best meta for the champions. If you think about it, like everything he can just fucking go ham on. Of course.
But I mean, his Kai'Sa, his Zeri, his Ezreal, all the champions that Gumayushi and T1 are very sus at, this guy is fucking insane on.
The eye test just checks out like a motherfucker for that
it's
player.
crazy.
It's so good, isn't it? It's so good.
Yeah, so if you're not watching Hanwha right now, Hanwha, I mean, it's a good meta for them. It really is a very good meta. And the thing about Peanut is that Peanut is a pathing guy, and Owner has never been the, like, 4D chess pathing guy. Owner's the guy who comes into mid lane or bot lane, and he helps you dive them and gets you more ahead, and then he sets up a tent in your jungle and just sits there on engaged champions and invades you, right? Peanut's the guy who's like, well, how about I flash over this wall, but I still have Hex Flash on Peanut, then I'm like surprised in your lane. Like, and on champions like Zyra or these picks that you can really get a lot of value on a smart objective control and pathing, like it's great. It's great. But you know, what's so weird about T1 in all of this is that it's like they forgot how to play the game the way they like to play it. And what I mean, Thorin, is like against BNK Fearax. Okay. So Fearax, Raptors on Zyra. We're 20 minutes into the game. That means Baron's up. This is game 1. Faker on Tristana TPs to bot lane, and then Fearax just takes Baron at 20 minutes because Zyra can do Baron by putting a bunch of plants down and ulting Baron in no time flat. And it's like, T1, you are the Baron sneak team. You know what this timing is. Why is Faker TPing as Trist to bot lane to save tier 1 bot turret and trading it for Baron? It's terrible. So like the thing about T1 is like they don't seem to even be able to make the shot calls that they have made in the past before. And that's what's disturbing about them. Like we know okay, if you want to hand wave this and say, they can't play these champions. Fine. You're right. They can't. It's a bad meta for them. But why are they making mental and macro mistakes? That's not who they're. That's weird.
Yes. Right, 2 things for you. 1, this is a purely random tangent, but you might appreciate it. The reason I also can't handle the name Fear X is there's actually a film from 2003 starring John Turturro and was directed by the guy who did Drive called Fear X, which is like a really sort of like psychological film. It's about like a writer who's like got some shit. Anyway, you'd have to look it up. Like it's one of those ones where all like it's like a super psychological, it's like experimental type film. It's quite a weird one. So 1, I always just think of that, and it's obviously a shit League of Legends team. But 2, Monty, this is where I feel like we're in WWE. Like the narratives they're not, you know what, Monty? These aren't real wrestling matches that are happening and people with superior wrestling ability are winning. These are storylines being set up, and I can see the cynical next story plot point. Because right now, T1's at its absolute crisis point. They're 5-5. The next match, guys, you can't even script this, is against KT, who in theory suck, remember. If KT wins... They will be 2-0 in this whole split against T1, and they'll overtake them in the league standings.
Yep.
If you hate T1, if you're Dom, basically, that day could be your Independence Day. I want it to be like the movie Independence Day, where he does that speech at the end, Bill Pullman, about how it's Independence Day. That could be for Dom, your moment to rise up and take these bastards down for good. And also, by the way, if T1 loses that game, Monty, bro, how many trucks are they going to send? Is it going to be like a fucking, it's going to be like that Canadian truck convoy or something like, holy shit, dude, what are they going to do? Because the reason it's perfect is because it's KT, Monty. The sheer iniquity of losing to this Beryl Pioshik bum-ass KT lineup twice in one set. Like at this point, they may as well just pretend Faker's injured again and bring Poppy in just to try and recreate Cargo Cult style, the same scenario. Because I think if they lose this next series, that just psychologically, they're surely in so much trouble, mate. Sorry.
I mean, hilariously, KT also lost to FearX in that same week, right? So they're coming off the same shame in a way.
Well, obviously, in that case, you have to lose to them to make it look legit. Well, you have to like create the.
I'm glad you bring up the standings though, because FearX won both of those matches, they now are 5 and 6, right? Because they won versus Nongshim. So basically, one of those teams is going to be tied with FearX.
You mean if FearX beats Bro, FearX could actually leapfrog T1?
Yes.
Bro, this actually is the haters' ball. If you hate T1, this is your glory day. I know it's too good, isn't it? It's too good.
Probably until T1 plays DRX, and then obviously like T1 will probably win that one, but who knows at this point in time. And then the week after that, Thorin, we actually have the T1 Gen G rematch. So it's and T1 actually next week, T1 plays D+ and Gen G in the same week. And like, do you favor them over either of those teams right now? D+ has looked a lot better, and D+ is actually kind of playing their own style in a very interesting way at the current point in time. D1 versus or D+ versus Hanwha later this week is probably going to be a banger.
What's funny is I saw someone in Twitch chat tried to say this, so I'm just going to say it right now. Have you ever noticed, Monty, how convenient it is? It's only the moments when T1 loses that suddenly DDoSing's the biggest issue ever. Injuries are give me a fucking break. Bro, he had that. If this injury was from last year and it still affects him, then he was injured during that fucking run in the playoffs in LCK where he looked good. He was injured at Esports World Cup where he just won it, and he was injured at MSI. So he's injured at all of it. The point is, you're only bringing it up now because he's fucking losing, isn't he? So yeah, spoiler. Exactly.
He also did look very good in spring. And he was fine at Worlds too. So I don't know. Who knows what the nature of the true nature of the injury was, but he was on point in spring. He was one of their best players in spring. It's the meta that's really hurting him. He just doesn't have the flexibility in the meta, and this team was not designed, I think, to be successful in this meta. Their success has never come in the way that the game is being played now. So hopefully, this week, last week was 14-13.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to do this. How can you actually complain? Two factors here, Monty. One, this player has played longer at the top level than maybe any other esports player ever. It's totally logical he'd get injured eventually. Two, he is Korean, where you grind like a motherfucker. And those memes of like the Tiger Mom of like, A is acceptable. B is, basically all right. C is kicked out of the house. You know that joke of like where they do that? That almost is what they do. So first of all, he's been grinding like a motherfucker as well as a one-man army. He's essentially done what we just said T1 does. He's been in a million worlds and gone deep. He's been in a million LCK and gone to the final. He's essentially put the most wear and tear on his body of any league player ever. And then finally, I'll just throw this out there, like, hasn't he had a pretty amazing career? Like, it's actually logical eventually his wrist would give out. Like, it can't just last forever. Like, to me, I think this is one area where people in esports are going to have to learn eventually. You can't just grind forever. It's the same concept as the pitcher in baseball, Monty. That movement is so unnatural to do this with your arm. And also, this is really unnatural to constantly just move your fine motor precision muscle like that. Like, that's why everyone who does that as a job has the same wrist injuries. Surgeon, guitar player, drummer, like archer, all these sports, all of them get the same injury that eventually ruins your career. So, like, even though I understand, you might think, like, well, it sucks for Faker. He would be better if he wasn't injured. Bro, one, I think he got a lot out of the tank, didn't he? And then two, he did have, like, it's totally logical eventually it would break down. Like, it's not unfair. If anything, by the way, what's unfair is the million other players who had their injuries in 2014 or 2010. He held out a long time before he ever got these big issues. So I understand it's not ideal now, but it's also like, it's like a logical consequence. Like I say, the sheer wear and tear on this guy's wrist must be bonkers. Like imagine if you could total how many games Faker had played in league. It'd be so outrageous number, wouldn't it?
He also exists at a time period in esports where he's going to get very good care for this as well.
Yeah, that helps too. Absolutely.
Like, clearly they're going to spare no expense in terms of taking care of him because he's, there's a lot of
Oh, and
money.
here's a funny one. As a historian, that you'll like this. Do you want to know another player, Monty, who towards the end of their career, when they were still really good, kept getting constantly inhibited by wrist injuries? Flash. Same story.
Yep.
They've just played 1 billion games and they've been in 1 billion finals, had a really long career. Like, unfortunately, this is what's going to happen in esports. That's why I give the example of the baseball pitcher, because someone once described it to me like this. They said in baseball, you don't usually just choose to retire. When you're the pitcher, your arm just fucking wears out eventually. You're like, oh, well, nothing I can do now because you've just done that 1 billion times, haven't you? Like, it's good. It's inevitable. It's going to happen at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, there's tons of obviously very weird injuries that baseball pitchers have because of the way they're doing it, which is why, typically you don't want a Shohei Ohtani who's like trying to be one of the best hitters while also being a pitcher, because it's like, shit, he's kind of like ruining himself twice as fast. Yep. Exactly. It's cool while it's happening, but it's not very cool in the long term most of the time. And even Ohtani has had several seasons now where he just couldn't pitch, right? He just couldn't pitch. Like, he had some injury, so he could still hit, but he couldn't pitch, right? So it's been up and down for sure. But yeah, look, if Faker's wrist is still hurting him, I mean, I do think the solo queue thing, we haven't heard about that in a little bit, so maybe that's been fixed. I have no idea whether that's a persistent problem or not with them. They've kind of hushed up about it, so maybe they're trying to just not give publicity to it so it goes away. Maybe they're still having those practice issues. I have no idea. But honestly,
by the way, as we talk right now, there's an LPL game on between LNG and JDG, right?
Right,
Monty?
yes.
And if people don't know, this split they have really heavily fielded in JDG. The guy Sheer, the one that everyone wanted to see play instead of Flandre, right? Mate, I can't. I just can't. Every time. Do you like how his head? Every time I see him, I can't, Monty. There's just no way. Like, this guy is like, if you're in an old-fashioned cartoon when they find the Fountain of Youth, he looks like the after when they come out of the Fountain of Youth. Like, this guy's outrageous what he looks like.
It's so
like,
funny.
Forget, Monty, I wouldn't even believe, allegedly, I wouldn't even believe he was 16, never mind like 18 or something. Like, bro, he looks 13 years old. It's crazy.
Dude.
He's so cute. It's unbelievable, guys.
He's very good, too. And he's been the main top player.
He's fucking sick, mate. Yeah, he's a prodigy.
But when I was doing VOD reviews on my stream,
just put in share JDG and put Google images and just look at what it brings up.
Watch him on LPL, because like in my VOD reviews, I was just making fun of him because like if you literally look at his teammates, like look at this headset that I'm wearing, it looks normal sized on me, right? The headset that Sheer has on literally looks 2 times the size of any other player's headset because his head is so small because he's definitely not 18, guys. And then you watch him stand up and he's like tiny compared to the other players. It's like there's no way this kid is 18 years old. It's so funny.
The problem is, though, Monty, he is an example, though, of why I've always said LPL is what makes the case that Riot is wrong, that you should limit the age of when you can compete. Because notice it's another person, Monty, who I would speculate is potentially 15 years old, who's fucking world class in like their rookie split. Like,
very good.
The level of talent you can get over there is just something else, mate. They don't just become like, hey, he's a good player. Like, bro, this guy looks really fucking skilled at League. Like, it's going to be dope when I would say when he's the right age. He can already play now. He can already play now. Don't worry about it, boys. It's all good. It's all good. He's already in the game.
Just like look at his camera when he's on stage and like look how big.
The other reason why Monty is because he's contrasted against Flandre, who was old as fuck. Flandre looks like it's his fucking uncle. You know what I mean? Like, it's outrageous the difference between the two of them. It's so the contrast is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Just look at him with his headphones on, guys, and you tell me that is not a child. But yeah, I mean, he's really good. And also, I'm going to have to watch those games tomorrow because those are probably my 2 favorite teams in the LPL right now, LNG and JDG. So that should be a really fire series. I mean, we can talk about LPL quickly because like how many fucking good series do we get in this league now? Like JDG versus BLG last week, LNG versus BLG
this format
last
is
week.
Killing it, isn't it?
Oh, it's great.
Because I know what you mean, Monty. I'm used to looking. What I do every week with LPL is this. At the beginning of the week, I'll look at the schedule and I really cynically, like with the NFL, I just circle the only good games, basically. Yes. I go, right, I'll take JDG against LNG. And then what you realize is it takes your brain a while to update, like, bro, it's the new format. they're nearly all bangers.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
like
look
one
and you're like,
banger
wait
a
a minute.
day.
Yeah, because you just look at that good group, the Ascend group, mate, it's unbelievable. Like almost every single match is a match you want to watch. It's known teams with big players and massive. Oh, this format is dope. It's really good. And you're already seeing, because you're getting this constant big level marquee matchups. Bro, the amount of fucking parity is crazy right now. It's crazy, the parity in the league.
Yeah, what was really surprising is LNG was on top and then lost to FPX. And like FPX has been, I would say, slowly ramping up once again. But yeah, I mean, outside of LDG and NIP, who have basically lost their games, like the top 7 teams are not so far away from each other. Even Weibo, who was pretty shameful earlier on, is starting to like put it together now. And
they're stealing some games, mate. Yep.
Tarzan's brand has been like pretty legit. I mean, they played BLG close, but I mean, we've got LNG versus JDG happening right now. And then later this week, you know, what are the top esports versus anyone's legend, top versus FPX, LNG versus AL, like Weibo versus FPX. Like there's just a bunch of bangers happening constantly. And the thing, Thorin, is like, this is a single round robin. So halfway through next week, we're done. That's it. And then we play the play-in matches into playoffs where the bottom teams from the top group play the top teams from the bottom group for those very final spots. But right now, like what's surprising is that but LNG is on top, right? That's probably not something that is, you know, people expected given like Scout's kind of shit performance this year. He's turned it on in a big way. Like he looks fucking sharp now, Scout. And then the other one is obviously anyone's legend, where it's like, oh, well, they did well in that group where Weibo and NIP underperformed, but are they actually good? The answer is yes. Like they've played a lot of really good games. Top Esports had a tough start to the split, but they had an even harder.
They had the same EWC hangover though, and all that jazz, you know.
They did. They also had a really hard strength of schedule.
The obvious team that's in hell is NIP, mate. It's bad enough NIP was always on the brink. Bro, there's like, they're unironically, it's like 7 teams that are better than them right now. Like, it's crazy.
Aki has never been that good. Shanji has been performing kind of poorly. Like sometimes Rookie like can carry this team, but honestly, like
even Rookie's had the odd bad game that were really bad this split though, mate.
But Fodak is a fucking
he's a fraud. Yeah. He's a fucking spring season merchant, mate. He never makes it to summer, I feel like. You know what I mean?
Fodak is a bum. And this team, unfortunately, like you look at their record, like 0-6. Oh man, they must be bad. Remember that they're still in the good group. Like this team would probably body most of the teams in the lower group. So that's why it's kind of fake to like look at the results, because you're like, oh, NIP must be really bad. I mean, they're bad compared to these other teams, but they're not actually, they're still a mid-table team in the LPL. It's just they're only playing the best teams, right? Which is a product of this format.
I agree, though. When you consider we're not that far from the playoffs, mate, the playoffs are going to be straight fire. Let me check when it actually begins. The playoffs begins on the 3rd of August, so we're talking about like a week and a half.
Yes.
Mate, that's going to be amazing, that playoffs. It's going to be sick.
It'll start with those qualification matches that I talked about. So we get some really cool best of 5s where we get to see interaction between the two groups. And like, is NIP bad and is OMG good? Or is it just a function of the teams that they are playing with and the strength of schedule between the two groups? We haven't seen those matchups, so they're just, I think, straight up fun on their face. And then it's straight into the regular bracket. But yeah, it's looking really good. This LPL format it is very complicated. But the nice thing, Thorin, as you mentioned, is I'm not saying you don't understand it, because obviously you do, but you do not have to understand it. All you have to do is just look at the schedule and be like, yes, oh shit, those are some good games, and then watch them.
By the way, I've even got a suggestion, even though they would never do it because they're Riot Games. You could just combine a bunch of different disparate ideas I had over the years and take a cue from the LPL. So the genius of what the LPL's done, if you think about it, Monty, is the problem with the LPL is it had too many teams. So you usually had 5 to 6 trash-ass teams. So they found a way to give them a little bit of access to the top teams, but then essentially segregate them because they're not good enough, and have like, you know, almost like a fucking, like a top class in maths and then like the remedial class. All you need is this. If you all hate the LEC, when those two teams get kicked out, they don't really get kicked out. They go down and they play like the top EU Masters teams in a who gives a shit group. And then one one team gets a playoff berth out of that, I would do it, man. That would be sick.
That's like how NLB used to work with LCK back in the day, too.
I actually did a video like this where I said they should just make the bottom of LEC and the top of EU Masters. NLB essentially should just make that the EU Masters tournament, because it would also give such an incentive to those ERL teams to compete against the sort of sixth best LCS team, wouldn't it? LEC team, whatever.
What I like about this is that now they did this a little bit in LEC by like kicking out the two, but like they found a solution to these being franchise leagues, because franchising
you need to still give them games. That's the problem. You can't have it like this where Rogue's years over, 6 months to go. Exactly.
But basically what LPL did was they created a system where they were forced to have franchising, but they're like, how could we not have franchising? So they basically just split their franchise teams into two leagues and then have the leagues interact with each other. It's great.
Yes.
It just goes to show, guys, that it would be fun. Because now I'm just going to go back to my Super League concept, Thorin. Imagine if this happened on a global scale where LCS was the secondary league, and then you had promotion into the top league. And then all of a sudden,
by the way, you could even do it like this, Monty. You could make it so that instead of it being there separate, you all start in your domestic league in the first split. You qualify to the Super League. Those 4 teams go up or whatever, and then you have the Super League. And then each time you can still, that way there's still a chance if you are like a rising team to make it. You could even combine the two. You just have to see the vision, right?
Right. And you could also create a Super League bracket where the top 6, the top whatever number of teams go into the playoff bracket, and then the top teams that have placed domestically in each of the major regions also go into that bracket, or have a play-in chance against the bottom teams. You basically just create this format, but you do it with all the global leagues, and then you have a Super League.
Now imagine this. Now imagine in your Super League, once they qualify there, it is like G2 against T1 5 times a year. You do get top esports against Gen G 4 times. That would be fucking amazing, mate. That would be the dream right there.
It would also just make G2 a much better team, because they would be in Korea half the time
Team
actually
Liquid.
Practicing.
Imagine Team Liquid actually playing like 10 series BO5s. That would be fucking amazing. You'd actually get to see how legit they are.
Yep.
Because, by the way, if you give them enough chances, eventually they're going to have a game where, like, they almost beat T1. They're going to eventually fuck around and beat a T1 or a JDG or something. Like, it's not impossible. So it would be so cool to see. Just give them the sample size. Get them have enough chances. Give them a chance. By the way, give the coaching staff a chance to prepare for this, to get used to it, to have the experience. I think it would be amazing. I actually think all the downsides people think of are just imagined. And I actually think the, like, upsides would just absolutely play out in reality, mate. To bring it all the way back, that's why we're pointing out this format is clearly mega. This format is the best one the LPL's ever come up with.
Yes. And you don't have to understand it. It's just good.
And notice they've even done the same thing with the playoffs, Monty. They have all weird ways to enter the playoffs. Where do you come into the playoffs? Then the part of the playoffs that's the least important, it's single elim. And then the part that's most important, it becomes double elim. Dude, these guys have nailed what we understood the Flashpoint years ago, which is you don't want in theory, most perfect format. You want the format in practical, actual, real terms, plays out really awesome as much as possible. Like this format, like we're saying, captures all the right compromises you want to have the best games and the best teams, but still allows things like all the other shitter teams and loads of playoff teams. Like they've actually mastered the compromise. I think they've done a really good job, the LPL. They took a lot of years cooking to marinate to get to this point, but I think they've got the best one now. I think it's actually fucking sick, mate.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of fun. And those of you who've been watching know, and it's like, we just get good games and then we get more good games in playoffs. So like, what's not to like about this format? It has made LPL significantly more fun, significantly more interesting. So I'm into it. We're going to talk about LCS a little bit.
If the keyword is a little bit, but
yeah. Just a little bit. A touch of LCS. So LCS is back. I actually wonder if there was some sort of issue with the API this week because of Valorant. Because none of the stats have been uploaded to the third-party sites from League of Legends, which is really weird. So like the scoreboards and everything like that we typically see.
They probably just scrape it from the API, you think?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like those scoreboards have not been present. And also on the statistics sites,
it would
like
be on
GOL.
brand. that the literal home region of Riot Games would be the one that wouldn't have access to the basic data that we need to follow the league in a coverage manner. That would be somewhat on brand, you know. Can't we fix this, surely? Come on, for fuck's
Yeah, because
sake.
the actual sites that do stats like Games of Legend or Oracle's Elixir, as far as I know, haven't been updated either. So there must be some issue with the API, one would assume, that they're putting out, because like I'm looking at Leaguepedia right now too, and there are no scoreboards for the games. But I did see them. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. Oops.
Maybe Reddit has them or something.
Well, there are on LEC Esports, I think. Let's find the match list. Yeah, they're actually not uploaded on GOL either. So something weird is happening for sure. I will head over there, but I can talk about, a couple of these series. Like, for example, is Cloud9 good? They played 100 Thieves. I'm going to point something out about Cloud9 right now. They played Dignitas in that first week of competition, and they won. But their other weeks of play so far have been Immortals, Shopify Rebellion, and now 100 Thieves. And 100 Thieves is a very bad team, guys. They are exceptionally bad. They are really trash. So it's not the 100 Thieves of the last few years. They are truly awful. They play NRG next week, which means that we've saved Team Liquid and FlyQuest for the last 2 weeks of the split.
AKA the only other good teams.
Exactly. So C9 do not believe their record is what I am telling you guys. They do not look good. They picked Renekton Nidalee, and then Blabber missed all of his spears, and they lost topside somehow despite having Renekton Nidalee. And yes, they won these games, but they didn't really look good doing it. And the reason they also got a lot of value out of this Renekton pick is that 100 Thieves is so dumb, they literally just walk and faceplant into a Renekton. Like, there isn't flanking. It's literally Thanatos just sits there, and then they walk into him. The other thing is Thanatos also was throwing, game number 1, he almost threw just because he took a very ill-advised all-in onto Sniper in the top side, who was playing Cassante and lost. He made up for it in game number 2 when he actually had a really good invade and managed to take out River's brand in the jungle, and I thought that was very clever. But Thanatos continues to be super disconnected from this team. There's a lot of skill shots missing right now, especially from Blabber. I thought his Nidalee play was really quite bad in terms of skill shot accuracy. And the saving grace is that somehow 100 Thieves is so awful, Ayla cannot hit a skill shot with Leona to save his life. He will miss every E, every ult, doesn't do anything, and they still have absolutely no macro.
You know what? I'm going to give this guy an award. I'm going to create an award that we should have had the whole time, but it's back. Are you ready?
Yes.
I'm going to award Ayla the inaugural Kiwi Kid Award, because this guy is one of the greatest LCS check stealers of all time, and only the kid himself, Kiwi Kid, who famously is a top laner, died a billion times as a support, wasn't even good either. Bro, this guy... Every team he's on, he's a bomb. What is the he's one of those people. I have to make my old joke. He must just be either the best cop of tea maker of all time, or he just hypnotizes people. You are fine, sleepy. He's like, how's he getting these teams? He's criminal. He's criminal. What an into this cunt is. Oh fucking hell. Look how many top teams he's been on, bro. How many top teams this guy has been on. He has been forced into 3 or 4 contender lineups at this point in time. I don't know. You know what my assumption is? I'm almost certain, Monty, he must just be the Scrim Demon. He must be. It has to be something like that. Because there's no way they're going off what he's doing in LCS. There's no way.
I mean, look.
He's got some really bad ints over the years, mate. Some really bad ones.
Jojo. Anyway, yeah. I mean, and 100 Thieves, remember, Quid is coming off this MVP performance that he didn't deserve, by the way. He was not the MVP. I don't know what to say. If
people just wanted to have an angle to give it to someone else on that one, mate. That just looked like almost one of those media narrative, Yeah, because let's face it, there was a lot of ill sentiment towards Inspired. People didn't want him to be the best, did they? They want to sort of hate on him. So we'll see how that's aged.
But I mean, this 100 Thieves team has no macro. They can't convert leads into anything. Like, they got gifted in game 1 of the match against Cloud9 so many advantages. Like, the Renekton was behind. Nidalee missed every spear. They actually, like, C9 could not control the top side of the map despite it being Renekton, Nidalee, Tristana into Azir, Poppy, Cassante. Like, I don't know how you fuck that up, right? You should be able to control grubs. They can't. They give up like the majority of the grubs in that game. Thanatos is dying in these really stupid 1v1. It's a whole fucking vacuum. And then they just get gifted the game for free because 100 Thieves macro is so bad that they just run into Renekton. Like, Renekton doesn't have to flank. The way you win with Renekton is you pick him and then you mind control the other team to just walk into a brush where that Renekton is. So really terrible performance by 100 Thieves. And it doesn't give me a lot of hope from Cloud9 because they're not even playing their comps out well. They're not. Like, they are not seemingly a good team. Like, I don't think FlyQuest is great, but they sure look a fuckload better than Cloud9. And TL looks way better than Cloud9 does. I mean, we can talk about Team Liquid and Dignitas.
By the way, on the last C9 point, I would just say this. I made this comparison before, but holy shit, dude. This is why just signing Thanatos alone wasn't the fix to this team. Because one, it never addressed the problem from spring, that they obviously lack shot calling. Like, they're not a very coherent team, despite how good on paper some of the players are. And two, this is the main thing I worried about when I heard the sort of profile behind the scenes and the hype for Thanatos. It's like, bro, I'm getting crazy Summit vibes again. Like, this is so... Because the problem with that is, like, the reason I think those players, Monty, have to actually be in Korea, because you saw him when he was on Team Liquid, he had the same problem. You have to just play to them 24/7. You have to cater to this guy all the time, as if he was like Smeb and he is just going to carry the game. And if you don't, if you think you can just play and just tell him, like, just be, they're not going to do it, mate. They just play like they're the superstar, you know.
I think it's not fair to Thanatos. Like, he's a rookie, and also, like, he looks like he's having trouble communicating in game with his teammates. Like, he's just like not there a lot of the time. And it feels like they're not.
What do you expect? It's a rookie Korean who was very inexperienced.
Exactly.
Like, what did people expect? That's what I mean.
At least Reaper's the coach now. I mean, he can talk to him in Korean. But yeah, he is super disconnected, and that's a big problem when it comes to this team. And like, it hasn't. You know, I expected it to look better. Thorin, what's so sad is these motherfuckers just had 3 weeks off or whatever. Shouldn't it look better? You're playing against 100 Thieves. They suck. Oh. You should be better now. Like, when is this team going to get good? That's my issue with Cloud9 is like, there was such a grace period because you add Thanatos for summer, right? And then you play like a couple matches, but then you get this massive break to fix your issue. It is a gift to get this break. And it doesn't appear that any of the issues have been fixed. And yet, Thorin, they are technically the first place team in this league, again, because of strength of schedule. Because they have the highest game differential because they've 2-0'd a bunch of their matches that, frankly, they didn't even deserve to 2-0.
Yeah,
and
then
they play NRG next week, who suck too.
If you go with your eyes and watch Team Liquid play, Team Liquid has been the best team in this fucking region the whole time from day one to today.
Yes. And, you know, with Team Liquid, I have to do your guy Jensen here because that Dignitas match that they played, holy shit, like, Dignitas was horrific. Like, Jensen was horrific in this match. Like, if you look at the Dignitas matchup, I want to also shout out the Cassiopeia pick because I think TL's coaching staff is really killing it in terms of pick ban, because I was having a laugh when we saw this matchup go down, because I don't know what is happening in the draft for Dignitas, but the Cassiopeia pickup is really actually quite clever against multi-AD carry compositions, because the thing about Cassiopeia is she can ground people in an AoE, so you cannot get out on Tristana. But Jensen knows this. Why is he all-inning into a Cassiopeia and then just getting grounded and dying in lane? And also, Thorin, what the fuck is Dignitas thinking? They see Cassiopeia picked. Their next pick, Kalista. What is Kalista supposed to do? Kalista cannot hop if Kalista is grounded. All you do is put the grounding on Kalista in a team fight, and Kalista can't move. And not only that, but Kalista's short range. So you just eat every single Twin Fangs. It was one of the most puzzling draft decisions I have seen this year. Did the casters mention it? Of course not.
A rhetorical question, of course.
Like, what? That was also just an outrageous point there. Which is like, I was listening to the cast of this game and the Cassiopeia gets picked and then they pick Kalista into it. And they have, get this, Thorin, a tri-cast with Kobe and Jat on there. And somehow nobody manages to mention the fucking the abomination that is this draft from Dignitas. And then the egregious play by Dignitas, especially Jensen, man, was fucking terrible.
Well, the problem Jensen's had this whole last year, mate, is he either has a carry performance or a completely shit performance. The floor is just non-existent. No, here's what I've always found curious is, I've often pointed out that the reason why you have to be sort of like a bit kind to people who are casters and broadcasters is because essentially they're just speaking a stream of consciousness off the top of the dome for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And inevitably you're going to like start a sentence that you can't end properly without making yourself look silly or say the wrong name, or every now and then you'll just miss something obvious on screen, right? Another thing that you have a problem with is when you critique people, obviously as a player, they have a different kind of pressure in their mind. They have a different like limited amount of information. So it's always easy to say like a player's playing shit, but then obviously you yourself in that scenario would play even worse, right? One of the worst examples I think ever of this is, remember the coach for Dignitas, guys, is Treats, the former TSM support player, the former SK Gaming support. Now, people remember he used to be in the sack with Dom, didn't he? And when he was in the sack with Dom, they were on their usual LS tip, which is every draft is an idiot coach. And why are you drafting this here? And what the hell are you going to do with that? And all I'm going to say is this. My only problem is this. I love that content too. But the problem I always had was Treats would then go in the game as a player and do all the same ints and stupid shit that he would have gone mad on the sack. And now as a coach, he does criminal drafts and everyone has to go, shit, that's my boy. That's a bit awkward. It's like, give me a break, mate. If it's bad, it's bad. You got to call it out. Like, you got to roast these, even if it's your boy. Like this, because this is bad, mate. This is bad. I mean, look, even as good players, but these comps are bad.
The surprise Cassiopeia pick is one thing. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I get it. Like, you try and play Tristana. Team Liquid's like, oh, here's the Cassiopeia, and you sit there and you're like, oh, that probably prevents Trist all-ins. And might, yeah, you're like, okay. But then you literally, the next pick is you're like, slam Kalista, guys. I'm like, what? That's just
like surely Sven's not asking for that. There's surely no way.
I don't know, man.
Come on, like, really, bro. Feels like
Sven has been one of their better players, to be fair.
Yeah, but can't feel like he bet. Just give me it anyway, bro. I can deal with it. Like this is. I feel like there's no way he said that. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also that like miasma is a giant AOE spell that grounds you. It's like there isn't a way to counterplay that as Kalista. Like it's just bad. And here's the other thing, Thorin. If you want to be evil, you could even put Cassiopeia in bot lane. That's happened before historically. Sure. Like you could do it.
Yeah.
And like it would shit on Kalista, I assume. It definitely shits on Kalista in these team fights. Now, did that interaction end up mattering? No, because the hilarious part was that Team Liquid was just fisting them so badly that it never even really happened. Like all the lanes were just getting owned. But it was really quite an embarrassing performance by Dignitas. Sure, they came back and they took a game, but man alive, Dignitas looks like, I mean, they started with a certain floor, but they have not developed either.
What I love is that if you're like someone who's in 5 years looking on Gamepedia, none of these Team Liquid rosters make any sense, Monty. So you're going to look back and you're going to see that roster with the $7 million and all like the Hall of Famers. And you're going to go, this one couldn't do anything like even make a final or get to Worlds. You'd be like, yep. And then you're going to look at this one where it's going to be like Impact in 2024 and Umpty and who the fuck's he on? Like, and it's not going to make any sense of that. This lineup is way better than that last one was. It's way better.
This lineup is the best Western team right now. I think at Esports World Cup, if they had played G2, they would have smashed G2. Like they actually have, and I said this from the start this year. I said this team legit has world-class macro. And everybody's like, oh, Monty, what are you talking about? Like, no, they do. And shut the fuck up. Who was right? It was me. They look like very legitimate. The coaching staff has been good. The meta has been very preferable for them, right? Like it's been up APA's alley. But Yun improved dramatically due to their Korean boot camping around MSI. Like this is a team that really got a lot better. Core JJ figured out how to play League of Legends again. Umti was always underrated. And Impact is Impact. So
it's the obvious angle you have to be scared about though, mate. Is you see all the people on Twitter in the West begging for like an assassin patch. Bro, the assassin patch could be the one that kills TL. Come on. Do you think so? If you bring all those fucking mid lane assassins back, I would like to see it, mate. I'd like to see that meta.
Yeah.
Would be interesting.
Also, I think in general, Team Liquid, you know, we talk about Spawn, but Rapid Star has actually been working with them as a remote coach as well.
Oh, okay.
And Rapid Star has legit been one of the best strategic coaches in
He's got a pretty good
Legends.
resume. Yeah.
He bounces around teams a lot, but for example, he was on KT last year when KT massively improved, like the longer that kind of that split went on. He was in China for a long time on various EDG, yes, very successful rosters. He was with Cloud9 for a number of years in the States when they were including through like the Perks era, I believe. But he's been really quite competent as a coach over the years. And certainly I think underrated. His first coaching gig was with EDG in China. And he's with T1 for a year too in 2017. So, but he's very smart strategically, and I think he brings a lot. And having him, I think at least have a somewhat of a voice, even if he is remote in this roster, probably is helping out because he's working with Spawn and Rainover. But very good coaching staff, and the org from Team Liquid really killing it. They've developed these players extremely well, which is great because they've signed them to long-term contracts that I'm not super confident in, but good for them.
By the way, if ever there was a time, I'm actually grateful there aren't 4 slots from LCS. This would be that time, Monty. 3's enough. 3's enough.
Oh, I mean, everybody earlier this year, remember Thorin was like, wow, LCS, parity of play. Everybody's looking good. How's that going for you today, dickhead? Like, literally, Cloud9 is top of the league because of a cupcake schedule. Team Liquid is actually good. FlyQuest is like half good. And then, holy shit, NRG, Dignitas, 100 Thieves, Immortals, and Shopify, dear Lord, these are not good teams. NRG is 4th place, and they look like trash.
I'm proposing a new format for the LCS. The top 3 teams qualify into a group where they just play each other every single week. The bottom 5 teams just fuck off. Oh, it is called NACL now. There you go. That's my new format. This league is garbage now, isn't it? I know. That's the worst thing about having the 2 weeks off in REWC. You're just waiting for bad matches. Like, come on, get through it all, Because the good matches, like you say, don't come till the very end, unfortunately. We had one or two at the beginning, and that's right at the end we get them.
The merciful thing, Thorin, is that best of 3s are a better format. And the other merciful thing is there are no more super weeks, so there's only ever 2 days of LCS, so I don't have to watch 3 days of LCS. That's my favorite part. I mean,
also, here's what's going to make you really upset, Monty, is that Dignitas's next matches are Shopify Rebellion, NRG, and then the end on Immortals. So, bro, they're going to be like 4th, and you're going to be so sad.
4-3.
You're going to be so sad when they're 4th. Come on. When they actually somehow get... Because if they're 4th in the league, how bad is this league? You know what I mean?
I prefer them being 4th than NRG being 4th. So I take it. You know what I mean?
Walk right with the team at the moment. It's true. That's why I keep pointing out, even though, yes, I understand I'm doing the Thorin thing of being really annoying and bringing up the thing you all wanted to forget about. But you did all tell me at the end of last year that NRG had cracked the code, the blueprint for how to build rosters. They should keep all those players. They're all amazing. Remember, guys, you all said this, not me. You all said contracts and Parlofox are as good as Yike and fucking Caps, and that this lineup is like great NA homegrown talent, and that if they just keep this approach, you know, they'll be the macro gods, blah, blah, blah. The joke is they're not even relevant now, whereas Team Liquid is actually like twice as good. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So it was funny too, because I heard, I don't even bother watching all of the shit games in LCS, guys, obviously, but I heard and I saw the game lengths on Energy versus Shopify Rebellion. And I saw, Thorin, that the the number of Elder Drakes that were taken in those two
Oh,
games was like
it's mental.
higher than the previous 100 LCS games combined.
Combined is the key word. Combined. That stat actually sounds impossible, doesn't it? I know.
It sounds actually impossible. I mean, shout out to whoever at the LCS figured out that stat, because that is so amazing that you would even think to look for that, because it's so unbelievable that that could possibly be true. But people were like, hey, Monty, don't you want to watch this on stream? I was like, no, I do not want to watch an hour-long NRG versus Shopify Rebellion game. And they're like, but it's really funny. And I'm like, no, I have to draw the line somewhere. So I will not be watching those games. I don't care. I am sad about Shopify, though, because I actually did like watching them in the spring, but I do not like watching them now.
The problem is their team always had that fatal flaw, though, where they were also a team that seemed like they had a really hard time closing the game out. They had some very interesting drafts and picks and ways they played out.
Fun to watch,
but yeah, they just showed that. I mean, the joke is essentially they had like the reverse BDS issue. The problem is they could just never close a game. They just could never win, could never get it over the line, which is the torturous problem to have, unfortunately.
Thorin, I have to ask, because this tilted me to the next realm, which is I had to watch fucking NA Zillion come back.
You mean we have to make like a term for that, like the curse of Bjergsen or something? You know, there has to be like some sort of like narrative angle.
To be fair, Jensen was playing the Zillion a lot of the same times that Bjergsen was, like during the same time period.
Yeah.
But the fact that in the year of our Lord 2024, the mid lane Zillion is re-emerging in a game 3 versus Team Liquid,
because it's one of those concepts, you know, like in a time of great peril, they have reached back into their history for dark technology that had been forgotten and abandoned. Like, and then out comes the Zillion, like he's back. And then my joke, yeah, that was ridiculous, isn't it, man? Why is that being picked? Bro, because here's what I don't get. Normally all the pro players do the opposite argument. They always go, well, why isn't Chovy playing if it's good? It's like, well, no one's playing this shit. No one's playing this, are they? Why are you picking it?
Bad. It's so bad. Dude, I was laughing so hard because, okay, so he plays it into Ziggs and they have the Kindred, right? And they're like, ooh, yeah, we're gonna get ahead on Kindred, which they did hilariously. They actually did get a double kill for Kindred really early on, and I was like, uh-oh, is Team Liquid throwing? But then, of course, what ends up happening is like Zillion has to use ult on himself because Jensen gets caught out. And then also in some of the team fights, Kindred's like ulting, and then Ziggs just satchel charges Kindred off the ult. It heals Team Liquid, and Kindred just dies.
I know.
It's like LCS is actually just comedy, you know, at some points in time. But if you were going to play Zillion, Thorin, why would you do it into the Team Liquid team who has good macro who doesn't throw? The reason you played Zillion was because you would wait for the other team to throw into you. That's not what Team Liquid's been doing. Like, they're just the wrong team to play that into. This is where you bop like NRG. This is like Zillion is the fucking NRG destroyer. You know what I mean? But it's just not going to work against TL.
No, I'm with you.
I did laugh a lot though about the Zillion. I was like, really? After all this time, we're just back to Zillion bit. What the fuck, man? You know, I thought Jet had a good point in the draft where I thought he was going to pick like, Spica was going to pick like Hecarim or something. I was like, all right, I'm kind of down with the Hecarim. But then they just picked Kindred. I was like, what does Kindred, like, Kindred literally can't play the game. Like, what? Kindred can't ult because he's just going to get knocked off his own ult. And then it happened, and it was glorious. It was a trash fire, though. This Dignitas team is fucking bad, man.
No, the sad thing is that it obviously looked so promising on paper, but it just hasn't manifested, has it?
Well, these drafts are just so bad. The Callista and the Cassiopeia, that just slays me. Anyway, good times. So that is our roundup of the LCS. I didn't watch Shopify versus NRG, so I can't comment on it. I am being selective in the LCS games that I view, in the same way that I don't watch Group B games from LPL, because what the fuck is the point? So next week we have exactly 0 good games in the LCS. Although I will watch FlyQuest versus 100 Thieves because I hate watch 100 Thieves because I hate them so much that I do enjoy hate watching them. So I will be checking that one out. LEC, though, after their extremely strange schedule of playing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, then switches the schedule again for this week just to make sure that nobody fucking watches these games. It's just like Riot really hates it when people actually know when LEC is happening. So they do go back to Saturday, Sunday, Monday. No, they have
It's the
Friday,
idea they
Saturday,
do this
Sunday.
sort of shit, and then they have the balls to talk about viewership going up or down. Like, shut the fuck up! You're not even giving it a chance. Like, how is it supposed to do anything?
So it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday in LEC. So we do actually have the 3 best of 5s. So probably more focus over on LEC this week and LCK and LPL rather than LCS. Shout out to the telecom war coming up. Have any final topics before we do viewer questions, Thorin?
That's it for now.
Let's do it. We're going to take a quick break, guys, and we'll be back with viewer questions.
Right, we're back for the final section of the show, which is, of course, called viewer questions. So the astute among you, or literate, will understand that means that we take questions from our viewers. But don't be too literal. It's not literally the people watching now or later. Well, obviously it wouldn't be later. We can't temporarily access things that aren't taking place live. It's people who've already submitted questions. How do you submit a question? You might ask if you are a naive LFN supporter, like in the opening commercial segment. Well, what you do is you just subscribe to the Last Free Nation Discord. And after you've handed over your Skrill, in exchange, you will get a permission to access a channel where you can submit a question. Monty will now read those questions out.
Yeah, and we may not get through them all this week because it's been a longer episode, guys. I was watching old LOL videos and came across the wild clip of Loco Doco telling the story of being contacted by the FBI because he was rank 1 on Glebe Glarbu's kill list. Yep. What did Loco Doco do in this past life to have so many crazy things happen to him? See, the thing about Loco Doco is he's just a magnet for crazy things because he himself is crazy. And this is what happens to crazy people is they draw crazy energy to them. It's also what makes it fun.
I actually think I know why these things happen to him, though. Because here's one thing, right? You might notice, for example, in my career, I've actually had a pretty good track record of not getting too many like mega notters, like get obsessed with me and stuff. But that's because, Monty, my style is if someone emerges with all those red flags, I can pretty quickly identify it. And I'll just, if you notice, my approach is I hard ignore them. Like I make it so that they don't exist for me. And then as a result, as a knock-on effect, eventually I don't exist for them. Like unless they're really crazy and they can maintain a one-sided parasocial relationship for years, they're not getting anything out of me. The problem Loco has is, this is one thing that's funny because people wouldn't have guessed this in the early days, but as an actual like person, he's kind of a bit naive and innocent. So I actually think his problem is he will sort of keep replying to people and interacting with them when they're obviously like really fucking sketchy people.
He also loves attention.
Yeah, you also can't let the drama angle go. It's true. So he just seems to find himself embroiled in these things at all times, doesn't he? Just from whatever angle.
Constant. He seeks out the drama.
In many ways, he's sort of like a Korean LS, which is one of my jokes. So I've just made it like, what about LS? But like, they both have the similar qualities like that. Like, I like them both, but I also do think, holy shit, they are just a vortex that draws smaller dramas into them. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's so tiring. I can't believe they want to do that. Anyway, next question. As a Kanye connoisseur, what song would Thorin pick as the walkout song for this Avengers squad of U.S. national basketball team at the Paris Olympics? Which Kanye song should the U.S. basketball team at the Olympics?
And that one feels like an obvious one. That one should obviously be the song Power.
I was going to say,
the premise is the U.S. national team has all the superstars, so it's like no one man should have all his power. Yeah, exactly. That's the obvious one, I feel like.
That song is such a banger, too.
It's a banger. By the way, also one of the best videos, that like ridiculous like AI type one where he's just like, it's the most swagged out. Because remember, rap is supposed to be braggadocious. That's where he's like a fucking like pharaoh or something with like a giant like sort of chain around his neck.
And
it's
everything's
a fucking
in
sick
slow
video,
motion, and it's like the painting or whatever. That music video is actually super cool. Throughout the course of 2024, which team would struggle more? A Team Spirit without Donk or a G2 without m0NESY?
I mean, that feels easy. The obvious example is G2 without m0NESY. I think G2 without m0NESY would barely even be a playoff team. So I'm going with that one.
What is a show you did in the past that you would love to revive if all hindrances like time, cost, or availability would be irrelevant? So which show that we did in the past?
Okay. I've got the problem with that is now I can just be biased though, because like the real answer is actually a bomber, because the real answer is narrative wake. But spoiler, I obviously don't do content with Kelsey Moser, do I? So that's not happening. So that would require an entirely different universe. Do you have one? Is the one we've done over the years that you would do differently?
Most of my shows have just stuck around, honestly. Like I haven't had as many as you have had. So I mean, if it was like things I've done, I wish Flashpoint would have worked. That would have been nice and fun.
Oh, by the way, luckily, if you notice, Monty, one thing that's weird about me, even though I'm someone who does like history and like going back through all the stuff, if you notice, I don't actually really do that myself. Like, I don't sit around all night going, oh, please, if only Flashpoint worked. Because, yeah, I'm kind of good at just putting things behind me and going to the next project. But I'll tell you what, there are times, like, for example, when it just got announced in CS that they're opening the circuit up and suddenly ESL won't have the monopoly and all these big TOs. It did make me think, bro, like, that Flashpoint project was absolutely cursed and doomed because it essentially, its lifespan was the entire period of COVID. That's it.
It was terrible.
So it was almost like the universe just said, you can never let this project succeed, because if it had even slightly been before or after, we could have done so many things with it. But sadly, we never were able to. We had like the anti-sweet spot, Monty. We got the worst timing ever, mate.
And by the way, don't get your hopes up that there's going to be another like team-owned league, because the thing now is, guys, is they're just suckling at the Saudi teat. So they're getting what the teams are getting what they want, which is just paid money by Saudi Arabia. So it's not going to happen.
Also, I always tell people the real reason why you will never know as a random shithead pleb that Flashpoint shouldn't have been what it ended up as is because you're a pleb, so you just believe all the news stories. I can tell you as a literal fact, we were told they had already locked in Astralis when Astralis were the reigning three-time back-to-back-to-back major champions and the best team in the world. And it was then inferred that because we'd locked in Astralis, that like we'd get 2 or 3 others, like we'd get like Fnatic, EG, the other top land teams. So there was a world that way. This is what I was sold Flashpoint was. It wasn't the idea that we were ever going to have all the EPL teams, but the premise was, and I always said this, if you just give me 3 or 4 of the top 10, what then we do with the format and the player stuff and the skits, essentially, spoiler, if you love the skits now, we would have done that back in 2020. The problem was we did do the skits, but we didn't have the players. 1, because of COVID, we had masks, and 2, we didn't have a Device and Nico. You think I wouldn't love to make a skit where Nico talks to Crims talks to, of course, I just didn't have the access. So sadly, it really is a what if. It's just, I don't bother torturing myself, but I just think if you actually knew what could have been possible with that project, it could have been so dope. It could have been so dope, mate.
Also, potentially could have changed the trajectory of like ESL getting bought by the Saudis.
Absolutely.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So it's actually really unfortunate, or at least face it, getting bought by the Saudis. Do you think League dies when Faker retires? He looks totally cooked. On the one hand, I think his retirement would allow other players, no, League won't die, is the answer, including his own teammates, to get the spotlight. It would force casters to stop filleting Faker at every turn. The other T1 is still the biggest draw. I mean, look, if the question is, would international viewership and LCK viewership go down if Faker retires? Obviously. There has to be like a succession plan. I don't know if that's like Chovy being anointed within T1.
How significant would it really be, though? You know what I mean? Like, here's the other thing. No, Mike, I'll give you the devil's advocate. Here's the devil's advocate, Monty. Notice in this analogy, I think what they're doing is acting more like what if Faker didn't exist. If T1 still exists and they just sign like Scout instead of think T1 fans wouldn't watch anymore. So you'd lose a little bit. You'd lose a bit, mate. In the same way as if Michael Jordan retires, you're going to lose a little bit of viewership. But if T1 was still really good, a lot of the T1 fans would still watch the game. So the reason, what I'll say is this, Monty, the problem he's having is this, is that one of the actual secrets of life itself and experience is you never know until after the moment that it was as special a moment. You can never somehow fully grasp it when you're in the moment. So what he's feeling now is he knows that the Faker moment has gone and he knows, fuck, there's nothing like that now. But what he doesn't realize is this. It's literally happening right now with Chovy. He is doing it right now. And I can tell you, as long as the game has a healthy enough funnel, it might not seem like it, but eventually you will always get another truly great player. Like you had Knight in China and stuff. So if people don't know, like I'll give you a very quick example. I had the same exact feeling myself about tennis, Monty, when I knew this era of the big four would be over, that eventually Federer would retire and Nadal was going to get injured and Djokovic would be really old. And everyone said, well, we'll probably all just stop watching because who's going to give a fuck? because at the time, the next generation weren't even vaguely as good. Like, they used to dust off all the up-and-comers. And then what happened was, out of nowhere, a guy came along who was like 19 years old. It's called Alcaraz now, who's the number one player winning all the chat. And he is actually in their vein, Monty. He's going to beat a Federer or an Nadal. He's won his first 4 Grand Slam finals. Like, he's beaten Djokovic a bunch of times. So the problem is, because these one-off people are they're such outliers, they're so transcendent, you can never know when the next one's coming. So it might seem like this, like, oh, well, Faker goes, what's the point? For all we know, a bit like with Milky Way, the next guy might even be out there on some bench that we don't know, on DRX's bench, who might be the next Titanic player who just dominates the game. So I wouldn't lose faith in that sense. As long as the game's very healthy and has a lot of people trying to play, I don't know if you'll get another Faker, because that's an enormous set of shoes to fill, but you'll get players that'll interest you and keep your attention. I don't worry about that.
Here's something. This Gen G team might be the best team of all time this year.
Exactly.
Right now. So it's not so bad, is it? It's not so bad. What exactly do casters see on their screens when casting? Is it a live spectator client or the stream we all watch? Do they have control over their client? I've been wondering for years. So it depends is the answer. So in League of Legends, oftentimes the casters they'll have what we call, they'll have the live feed, basically, right? The thing that you are seeing, but they will, in League of Legends, they will often also have a laptop or a PC at the side where they can check things and they're inside the client itself. Or they can call into production. Sometimes you'll have other monitors that have the other observers. So if you have multiple observers, you might be able to see all observer views if you look at a different monitor. For example, in Overwatch, we had like the production feed, like the live feed, plus we had like a feed that was basically like the mini map of the game that was blown up. That was very helpful to use. Or we had a view that was like, more third person, like a floating camera above the match, so you could see positioning and stuff like that. But for the most part, you're paying attention to the live feed because that's what the viewers are seeing and that's what where the action is. Right? Seem fair for Counter-Strike as well? I mean, pretty much people just cast off the live feed in Counter-Strike.
I mean, Counter-Strike's a lot easier because in that game, one, the observers, it's a bit easier to do. Yes. And then secondly, like the difference is it's a lot easier also to control a second view and just have like another viewpoint that isn't what the casters are showing. So I just think in CS it's very easy. I think in League it's harder. Like in League, you do notice people have times where I would say, especially in the West, sometimes the observance a bit scoffed is the problem. So if you're going off the broadcast feed, you're going to sometimes just literally miss important stuff, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and sometimes, like I said, you do have a PC there a lot of the times in League, so the analyst can walk over, like literally turn over to the PC and like use the, turn the mouse and like look at stuff within the game, which is helpful. Hasbro has appointed John Haidt, a longtime executive from Blizzard/Activision, as the new president of Wizards of the Coast. I'm not very familiar with him or other executives in Blizzard. I don't know this guy, to be clear. But I am concerned about the future of Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. Hasn't Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro like been terrible at managing Magic and D&D already? Totally. That's the impression that I get.
The weirdest one especially is to say Magic the Gathering. Bro, I always said this. In the same way as it absolutely is a fucking mockery of Blizzard, an indictment of Blizzard's understanding of esports, that they let someone else do Dota. It's like, what? Like, you had that game and you let it just go and never made it an esport. In the same way, it is mental that Hearthstone was ever a thing, Monty. Because if you remember what the original approach to Magic the Gathering online was, it was super cynical. Like, you had to pay for every individual card. Yes. Like, they didn't get it at all. They never understood at all the vision of what... Because if you think about it, right, if you could go back in a time machine now and convince the people from the Magic the Gathering, bro, their game could have like made more money from the digital online game than they ever could from the physical cards. It's mental. It's the same, like, there's so many things like that in esports. I wish I could go back and tell the person, because it's so fucking mad, like, how ridiculous it is that they didn't pick it up and figure out what you could do with it. Like I said, the Dota example's another one. What, you had that game the whole time, you just let it go and someone else did it. Like, what are you doing? What? By the way, another classic one, if people don't remember the famous one, is Games Workshop let Blizzard just make the game StarCraft instead of Warhammer 40k. You morons, you would have had the greatest esport of all time. Like, that would be Flash playing fucking Terran. He would be playing like the Imperium, you idiot.
And by the way, the funny part about this is that the original Warcraft, so not StarCraft, the original Warcraft was a Warhammer game. that then the license got pulled from, and Blizzard had to make their own IP. So they literally could have had Warcraft and StarCraft, and they didn't. Another question. Have either of you been following the Pros podcast the LCS has been producing? Yeah, I've seen a few of them. I've been enjoying the longer form player content. I think it's really good. I'm glad they're actually including the pros in this. Have you seen it all, Thorin? Oh,
I saw like the first episode. It was all right, but the problem I have is I don't mind it, but I find shows like that. I'm not as big a fan of players directing conversations, so I find they agree with each other a little bit too much. You know what I mean?
Since last episode, we talked about Mount Rushmore for LoL coaches. I want to ask the same question, but a Mount Rushmore for NFL quarterbacks. Who are your top 4 NFL quarterbacks, Thorin? Peyton Manning, Tom Brady,
Aaron Rodgers.
No Tom Brady?
Dan Marino. And then I might put Tom Brady 4th. There you go.
That's fair.
It's pretty good.
Montana?
Because, by the way, I do think the problem I have is Montana's just like a worse version of Tom Brady, in my opinion. I don't care what anyone thinks about that. The problem I have is this. I do think Tom Brady had essentially the most favorable conditions ever of any quarterback, and by far, by the way. Montana's probably second. But I also always say this, because some people then think I'm with all the Brady haters and I'm on their side. I'll always say this. He still did do it, though. Like, it's not like he just like someone just handed him the trophy. He still had to do those throws and stay in those games and make those calls. So people do take too much credit back from him. I just think you should essentially give more credit to the people who had a harder time. Don't take all of Brady's credit away, though. So he can still be on my list. And if someone thinks he's the GOAT, by the way, it's not my take, but it's legit. But I think those other 3, even though a lot of them might be called losers, like people might go, Dan Marino, just use your eyes. Use your eyes.
Dan Marino's amazing.
That guy's unbelievable. Yeah, the eye test checks out like a motherfucker on that player. Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? I know. I think that's a pretty good fall, though.
I think that's pretty fair. Like, for me, I think Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are definitely up there, and then like Marino and Rodgers are good choices. The question is like, how far back do you go? Because the other issue is like, if you go back far enough in time in the NFL, like the quarterback just wasn't as important. Like, are we considering like Terry Bradshaw, even though he won like all those Super Bowls, as one of the best quarterbacks of all time? You know, probably not.
No, no one ever puts him in the convos with all those rings, mate. No one ever puts him in. And don't you dare say, but he had that great Steelers defense. Do you know who Tom Brady is? Do you know who Tom Brady is, motherfucker? I can't take that angle. Because, by the way, the same logic. Why do Montana and Brady get to be in, but not Terry Bradshaw?
Yeah. And like, this may seem, I mean, Mahomes is definitely like going to be in that conversation soon.
Actually, I could have put Mahomes instead of Brady if I want to be a hater. But I guess his career hasn't finished. But no, he's had an amazing career so far, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, like there are some, I think it's very hard to pick a quarterback before the 90s who would really like be as good as the quarterbacks today, just because the game is very different, you know, especially in the last 20 years. You're
not taking like fucking Otto, whatever it was called from the old Packers back in the 50s. Well, mate, that's so whack, all those narratives in it at all. Because I actually think, by the way, in other sports, here's what's sad, Monty. Basketball's probably the most maligned sport, because if you ever go and look in 1960, it's actually weird things that modern day fans don't get that makes it look not as good. Like here's an example, Monty. Back in the 60s, you had to only dribble on the top of the ball with your hand. You're not allowed to ever put it even to the side. So all the moves they do now, you wouldn't even be able to do that. It'd be a traveling violation instantly. You couldn't, as an offensive player, lean into someone. If you leaned into them, it's an offensive foul. Now you lean into them, you get the foul on the defender, right? So my point is this: what makes the 60s basketball look shit is actually the rules. But even then, if you go watching the 60s, you'll be shocked how many athletic moves, like people going under the basket and dunking it back, like people can do all those moves back then. The difference is American football is the sport where people think of it as like, you're playing again. Like, you go and watch the 50s and 60s, holy, they're actually wearing that fucking leather helmet, and people are just doing like the 4-yard pass, and there's no run game, no fucking wide receiver game, and like the greatest wide receiver ever is getting like barely any it's mental. That sport is the one that like you should just cut off before, like, I don't know, the 80s or something, mate. Like, I think the 80s is the cut-off point, and anything before that will be the dark ages, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
It's wild, isn't it?
Does it surprise you too that we've had so few repeat world champions? It's really only T1 that's truly repeated. The two Samsung teams that have won have like absolutely no crossover between coaches and players. So true. So it feels weird to count them as a repeat, apart from the fact that it was sponsored by Samsung. No, because there's a bazillion League of Legends teams in the world. There's a lot of them, right? You don't have in a 32 team league like the NFL, you barely have repeat champions. Like when you win back to backs, it's crazy, right? If the same roster wins like 3 Super Bowls or, within a 10-year period, that's a dynasty, right? That's a dynasty. So really, and you have way more teams in League of Legends than that. Sure, not in Korea and China, but I don't think it's that insane. And T1 did put together like a dynasty around Faker when Faker was at his peak of play, and he's still, winning a 4th world title. So the other thing is players just haven't had as long careers as they do in traditional sports either to like make a dynasty happen. That's another part of the problem. Does it surprise you at all?
Does it surprise me what? What was the premise of the question?
That there have been so few repeat world champions in League.
No, because the joke is I'd go the other way. Like it's absurd how many times like T1 repeating was absurd in itself, right? Yeah, I actually think, by the way, the format is also incredibly hard to repeat in League compared to any other esport.
Yeah, because the format was bad and you only have 1 Worlds a year. Like if you have a major, like if CS would have like 2-3 majors a year. So what? Like it's a lot easier to win multiple majors with the same roster. Which happens first? TL loses a series.
Oh, and also then I did in that, in a game like League, especially. Think about the whole convo we just had for like an hour ago. Like the meta is incredibly impactful on who wins.
Yes.
The difference in other esports games is the meta usually more affects like fringe people. Like, like it affects the patch Zerg or the guy in CS who's only good on this 2 maps. It doesn't normally affect the best player. Like the crazy thing about League is, I've always said this, the most insane and infuriating thing about League of Legends is you'll have a guy who is called the best in the world, and he is the best in the world at this moment, but he's really the best on 3 of these 5 champions. And then Riot will just completely wipe the meta, and suddenly one of those 5 champions will be in the meta, and we all talk like he's just not as good now. And it's like, he's not even playing the same game. He's just playing a different game now, guys. Like a minute ago, he was playing Silas. Now he's playing fucking Corky. Like, what would the overlap be? There's no overlap there, is there? So I just think also League is, that's why actually it's insane that there even are repeat champions in League. Like, fair play to anyone who even makes back-to-back finals like the Samsung team he's talking about. Like, that's hard. That's really fucking hard. It's why, sadly, that tweet is, you know what, Monty? This is where haters don't even know the good donks. Because remember, I have an amazing tweet about Samsung you can donk on. When they made that Season 6 finals and lost in 5 games, I did a tweet that said, you'll never see this 5-man lineup in a final again. The joke is they were in the final and they won it the next year. That's actually one of the most memeable tweets of all time. But because it's that many years ago, none of you forget because you weren't there. You all just pretend you were there. If you look that tweet up, I never deleted it. It's whack as fuck. But it's because I had a point at the time, Monty. I also could never know they'd win with like fucking Crown as like a cordyceps fucking Malzahar mid as Ambition just sort of like plays with no hands and still checkmates. Who could have known that? But whatever, I'll take the L. I lost. I did lose that because I stupidly said that 5-man lineup even. So it's even worse that they got me. They got me, motherfucker.
It's amazing. Which happens first? TL loses a series or Shopify wins a game? Shopify will win a game. It's a best of 3. They'll win a game at some point.
Well, the sad thing is the league is so bad that's sort of a neck-and-neck race at the moment. Like,
well, TL's not going to lose a series, I don't think. But Shopify will win a game.
You hope.
Shopify will win a game.
I'm scared. I'm
series.
Scared that right at the end they just lose a series 2-1, but they've won all the other ones. So it doesn't matter, That's what I'm scared about an LCS.
Yeah, but Shopify will win a game first, surely.
Oh, yeah, true. Schedule. You mean first? That's true. That's true.
Like a game. Shopify plays Dig.
Oh,
sucks.
Right. It doesn't have to be the series, right? It's just a game. I see what you mean. Right.
They play 100 Thieves in the final week. So the question is, does C9 beat TL in 2 weeks, or does Shopify win a game versus 100 Thieves or Dignitas?
Or Dignitas, the
even
obvious one, isn't it?
Yeah. If you could have more seasons of any TV show keeping the same quality, which do you choose? Rome. Fucking Rome. You could have done so much with Rome. It was, you could have like actually just gone to a different time period in ancient Rome and recast the whole show, just had a different storyline. Rome was fucking great.
I mean, isn't the answer to this basically just all the great prestige shows before they got dropped off? So Game of Thrones, the early seasons, True Detective season 1. I mean, even fucking Sopranos. Almost every show eventually wilted.
I mean, The Wire could have gone
long.
for more seasons too and probably still been good.
Sure. Seinfeld, obvious one. This is they ended it early.
Which members of the esports talent pool would you cast as the titular characters of the Harold and Kumar series?
Casters, did he say? Has to
Yeah,
be casters.
which members of the esports talent pool? So casters,
Oh,
hosts.
talent pool. Because
Yes.
immediately I'm thinking someone like Doublelift immediately right in there, isn't it? Isn't it like Doublelift and Meteos or something, or Sneaky and Meteos or
Doublelift
something?
and Meteos.
Some of these,
That's
I mean,
good.
I even feel like these are the guys where if you just got them high, they would just go to White Castle and recreate the movie, surely, at that point in time, like, wouldn't it work?
Saudi deep throating is here, and I was wondering if it was inevitable. There are many to blame in the scene about the way that they grifted / overinflated lied about the value of esports, but with how rich Saudis are and how spineless everyone is anyway, wouldn't they have been able to buy all of esports anyway? Didn't the scene just set up the Saudis buying everything but for pennies instead and a bit less pushback because now we have 5 kids to feed an esports winter? Look, it wasn't inevitable. I think the timing was just really good because the Saudis you have to understand, the Saudis have already spent years figuring out sports washing. They did it in fucking soccer. They did it in golf. And so they're just applying this model to
Everything,
esports.
WWE, UFC,
Yes.
They've done every sport as far as I know, yeah.
The thing is they can't own all of soccer and they own all of golf now, but they can't own a lot of the major sports, but they can own all of esports. And they're doing that because they realize that on a long enough timeline, esports is the future, right? And so they're just getting ahead of it. It's very smart of them. They're very smart, unfortunately. They're just also really shitty.
By the way, that's also what tilts me when the Jacob Wolfs of the world try to paint it as though it's like a failed endeavor or it doesn't make sense, or even imply, and the worst one is when they imply the Saudis have to have like a profit motive, because one, that's not at all the way that circumstance works. And then two, as the person formulating this question pointed out, they effectively get to buy the esports properties for fuck all. Like, bro, you know that stat where they bought, it wasn't just ESL, they bought ESL and Faceit Group, all including their service, all combined for $1 billion. Bro, yep. You might have seen the other day, there was a story that said Twitch is valued at $46 billion. ESL runs all the tournaments. Like, that's only 1 billion. Bro, that is a steal and a half. That's fucking, like, for what that should be worth one day, that's crazy. So, no, I think if anything, they're laughing, mate. This is way easier than buying football and fucking golf and all that shit's way cheaper.
And they got 30 of the best teams in the world to sign up for their program for probably not that much money.
Yep. Whoever designed all this, they're doing a great job in terms of what I think their goals are. I think they're probably checking all the boxes, mate.
The Saudis and the ESL leadership are doing a great job of accomplishing their goals. Their goals are just shitty. That's what's unfortunate. But I do tip my hat to everybody involved in this project because it is brilliant. It really is very smart. And they're doing a very good job, but I don't like that it's being done. Who are some other coaches, GMs, players that ruined esports history? And is G2's CS GM making a case for himself by sabotaging m0NESY's prime?
What was the first part before the G2
Who are some other coaches, GMs / players that ruined esports history?
I mean, in general, if you're going to go players usually aren't that criminal. The players are more the ones like the famous one where like Alu got fucking Alexi B kicked out of events and stuff. Like there's some like that where they kick the wrong person and in doing so you sort of tank your team. Maybe Nico kicked Carrigan or whatever, like some of these teams maybe could have kept running. GM's way easier. Like the GM one, the reason why the G2 one's interesting, although to be fair, his team did almost win this last event, is because it just on paper looks like you've made like a mishmash roster that doesn't make that much sense and he's going to like limit the best players. In general, it's almost anyone, in my opinion. The most easy person to find is you just find a team where they've got the best player in the world, but the team itself can't win a tournament. That's like an obvious angle. Like Kenny S back in the day on Titan, there's an obvious one where a player got banned and they didn't adequately replace him. So Kenny S used to literally be like 1.5 times better than anyone else in the server, but then still narrowly lose the tournament, which is quite frustrating to watch, I'd say. So any of those ones. League's a bit harder. I think the obvious one is in the recent days, Frog, Mad Lions maybe. How Mad Lions dismantled last year's team. There's one for you. They used to be a perennial world
Carmine Corp for like this, just like
they were pretty bad.
Roster. It's pretty bad, especially in light of their current success. I mean, a lot of the LEC teams are super guilty. I would say Hanwha, like they could be way better with the amount of money that they're spending. They fucking like bought Zeka at an all-time high. Like, what the fuck was that?
By the way, in general, that org hasn't been good because remember there was a time, Monty, where they had Chovy and Deft, and the rest of the team was still shit. That was the fucking dreaded, the fucking Morgan and all those fuckers. That was, and like that was when I even knew that Chovy would never get his due, bro, because that was him being like Kenny S, like I just described. Like he used to have to actually smurf, and then the idiot fan would go, "Still not as good as T1." It's like, have you seen this team? Have you seen this team?
Yeah.
All I'll say is this, guys. Look at some of those players since then. Go and look at where the rest of those players that weren't Chovy and Deft, go look where they are now. They're all at the bottom of the fucking table. They're irrelevant. They're nobodies.
As someone trying to understand the history of drum and bass better, could Thorin recommend songs or artists in the genre prior to the mid-2010s, so 2015 or earlier drum and bass? Deep cuts are appreciated.
Right. The thing you want to do basically is drum and bass is all about the sub-genre within drum and bass. Like, I don't think there's any one person who just likes drum and bass. Like, for example, a lot of what people will know from the charts and pop music is liquid drum and bass, which the kind of like Dom listens to, where it's sort of like vocally driven and it's sort of like melodic. It's more like trance music if people know that from house, etc. Whereas the difference is the type of drum and bass I've always liked is the type called tech step or neurofunk, which is more like, it's a bit darker. A lot of it actually thematically, people use a lot of sci-fi quotes from movies and stuff. So if you want some like early 2000s amazing shit, like one of them, still a great group now, is called Black Sun Empire, because they're people who actually did, because they're Dutch, they had like a trance sort of influence. So their music is drum and bass, but it's very melodic actually. Like the main melodies are really well done and they have almost like a house element to them. If you want some of the darker shit, I used to like back in the day Technical Itch, which is very much like a very dark hardcore style. If you want some of that sort of a mix of the two, almost like Concord Dawn was like, I think they were from Australia, and they were like, again, a bit melodic, but they had like a quite an interesting sound because they would do some minimalistic stuff early on, but then they embraced all types of sounds. Let me think of some other people. I think a guy called Jade is very good, especially he's a Hungarian guy, especially his live mixes are really, really good. And his style also is very much based on like quotes from films. And like, he's got a really interesting ear for the music. And then if you want one more just to round it out, I was a big fan of a guy called Paula, who did like a bit of a minimalistic style where his style was very clean and interestingly produced. Sadly, he actually stopped after a while because he got tinnitus. So that's obviously not the fucking job to do, be a DJ and be constantly putting like loud music in your ear. So, but that guy had a few albums that were bangers. So check out that stuff. Black Sun Empire, Technical Itch, Concord Dawn, Jade, and Paula, and just check out the stuff from the 2000s.
Excellent. I'm actually going to call it there, guys. When this show hits 3.5 hours these days, it's time to end it. So if you have questions that didn't get asked, please repost them in the thread for next week. We're longer on the central part of the show this time around. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll be back with next week for more Summoning Insight. See you then.